Welcome back, my friend. Tonight we're stepping into one of the hottest landscapes any civilization ever chose to call home. Imagine opening your eyes before dawn beside the quiet Nile. The stars are still fading, cool air brushes against your skin, and somewhere across the dark fields a donkey lets out a sleepy call. Within only a few hours, this peaceful place will become an enormous oven beneath the desert sun. Yet for thousands of years, millions of people did not merely survive here, they flourished. Real facts from archaeology reveal that ancient Egyptians developed countless clever ways to live comfortably, despite temperatures that could overwhelm many visitors today. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is right now. Now, dim the lights. You wake while the world is still painted in soft shades of blue and silver. The eastern horizon glows only faintly. Birds begin their morning chorus from clusters of reeds growing along the riverbank. A gentle breeze carries the earthy scent of damp mud mixed with fresh water. The air feels wonderfully cool, for now. Everyone around you understands a simple truth. Every useful hour begins before the sun fully rises. An elderly farmer is already walking toward his fields. His sandals make quiet scratching sounds across packed earth. Behind him follows a patient donkey carrying woven baskets. Neither appears hurried. They simply know the rhythm that generations before them also followed. The Nile Valley rewards those who respect time. Within another hour, more people emerge from their homes. Women prepare simple breakfasts while children rub sleep from their eyes. Potters uncover yesterday's drying vessels. Bakers check clay ovens that still hold a little warmth from the previous evening. Fishermen untie narrow boats resting against the riverbank. The village slowly awakens. The smell of baking bread begins drifting through narrow lanes between mud brick homes. Smoke rises gently before the stronger winds of midday arrive. Somewhere nearby, someone crushes herbs using a smooth stone mortar. Another household grinds grain into flour with patient, circular movements. Nothing feels rushed. That may surprise modern visitors who imagine ancient Egypt as a place filled only with giant pyramids, dramatic temples, and powerful kings. Daily life was usually quieter. Most people spent far more time thinking about crops, water, shade, and tomorrow's meal than royal monuments. The rising sun gradually turns golden. Its warmth touches your face. You already notice people adjusting their movements. Conversations remain relaxed, but everyone works with quiet purpose. They know exactly what the coming hours will bring. Heat, lots of it. Historians generally agree that work schedules across much of ancient Egypt were heavily influenced by temperature. Physical labour often began very early because the coolest hours were simply too valuable to waste. This practical habit probably changed very little across centuries, whether someone lived during the Old Kingdom or much later under different rulers. Nature wrote the timetable. You stroll toward cultivated fields stretching beside the river. Green crops form a striking contrast against endless pale desert beyond. Irrigation channels shimmer beneath the growing light. Water quietly slips through narrow trenches dug with remarkable care. Touch the soil. It feels cool beneath your fingertips. That pleasant sensation will not last long. As daylight strengthens, the ground will begin releasing stored warmth back into the air. By afternoon, simply standing beneath direct sunlight could become exhausting. The Egyptians knew this without needing thermometers. Experience taught everything. Nearby, several workers pause briefly before beginning another task. One adjusts a simple linen garment hanging loosely around his shoulders. Another pours water into a clay cup. Nobody gulps enormous amounts. Small drinks seem more sensible. Simple habits matter. You notice something else. Very few people wear heavy clothing. Loose linen catches even the smallest breeze. Bare arms and legs help release body heat. Heads are protected by simple cloths or carefully styled hair. depending on occupation and social status. Fashion serves survival. The village itself also appears carefully arranged. Houses stand close enough to provide patches of welcome shade along narrow paths. Thick mud brick walls quietly wait for the hotter hours ahead. Their true purpose will become obvious later in your journey. For now they seem ordinary. Appearances can deceive. A woman sweeps dust from her doorway before sunlight reaches it. Fine particles drift through cool morning air before settling again. Dust is simply another companion of daily life here. It enters sandals, settles onto baskets, clings to clothing, and occasionally finds its way into nearly everything people eat. No one seems especially bothered. You continue walking until the river fills your view. The Nile reflects growing bands of orange light. Small ripples sparkle like polished bronze. Birds skim low across the surface searching for breakfast. The gentle sound of water contrasts beautifully with the silent desert standing beyond cultivated land. Without this river, almost nothing around you would exist. That is no exaggeration. Ancient Egypt depended entirely upon this extraordinary ribbon of life cutting through vast dry landscapes. Every cool drink, every loaf of bread, every woven basket, and nearly every shaded garden owed something to these waters. Even the morning air feels different here. It carries moisture. Farther away from the river, conditions quickly become harsher. Sand replaces fertile soil. Plants grow sparse. The breeze loses much of its freshness. Heat arrives sooner. The difference is remarkable. Some scholars still debate exactly how local climate varied across different regions and historical periods. Small changes in rainfall, annual flooding, or seasonal temperatures may have influenced farming communities more than written records reveal. Nature does not always leave clear notes behind. History keeps a few secrets. As you continue your quiet walk, laughter echoes from several children chasing one another between date palms. They seem wonderfully unconcerned about the powerful sun preparing to climb higher. Perhaps they have already learned what every Egyptian child eventually understands. Morning is precious. Use it wisely. One curious tradition described by some later writers suggests that people occasionally judge the day's coming heat by watching animal behavior at sunrise. Whether every village truly practiced such observations remains uncertain. Historians continue discussing how widespread these customs actually were. Still, it feels perfectly believable that careful farmers watched birds, livestock, winds, and clouds with remarkable attention. Their lives depended upon observation. You pause beneath a spreading sycamore tree. Its leaves whisper softly overhead. Shade cools your shoulders almost immediately. The change feels surprisingly dramatic after only a few moments beneath open sky. Trees become quiet friends. Nearby, an elderly man smiles gently while repairing a woven fishing net. His fingers move with practiced confidence. He wastes no motion. Every knot seems familiar. Every strand has purpose. There is something wonderfully calming about watching skilled hands repeat movements learned across decades. Perhaps that is one reason ancient Egypt feels strangely peaceful despite its harsh environment. People adapted, not through dramatic inventions appearing overnight, but through thousands of tiny decisions repeated every single day. Wake early, build wisely, dress lightly, respect the river, rest when necessary, continue tomorrow. These habits shaped an entire civilization. Soon the sunlight grows noticeably brighter. Shadows shorten. The coolness that welcomed your arrival slowly begins slipping away. Villagers continue working, yet movements become slightly more measured as warmth spreads across fields and pathways. The day has truly begun, and this is only the beginning of understanding how ancient Egyptians transformed one of the world's hottest landscapes into a thriving home for more than 3,000 remarkable years. You leave the fields behind and wander toward a cluster of homes just as the morning sun begins to gather strength. The air is still pleasant enough to enjoy a slow walk, yet you already sense a subtle change. Warmth presses gently against your shoulders. Shadows grow shorter. The village seems to prepare itself almost instinctively for another long day beneath an unforgiving sky. From outside, the houses appear remarkably simple. No marble columns, no glittering decorations, just sturdy walls of pale brown mud brick rising from the earth itself. At first glance, you might underestimate them. They do not resemble grand monuments that attract travellers from around the world. Yet these modest buildings represent some of the most practical engineering in the ancient world. Sometimes comfort hides in simplicity. You place your hand against an exterior wall. The surface feels slightly rough, with tiny grains of straw still visible inside the dried brick. It has already begun warming beneath the morning sun. Even so, the wall remains cooler than the open air around it. Mud brick is quietly performing its daily miracle. Ancient Egyptians made countless bricks by mixing Nile mud with chopped straw before shaping the mixture into wooden moulds. The bricks dried naturally beneath the powerful Egyptian sun rather than inside expensive kilns. It was an efficient process requiring materials almost every village possessed. The river supplied the mud. The harvest supplied the straw. The sun finished the job. Historians generally agree that these thick earthen walls acted as excellent insulation during the hottest hours. Heat moved slowly through the dense material. Interiors therefore remained noticeably cooler than the streets outside, especially if windows stayed small and direct sunlight was kept away. You duck through a low doorway. The difference surprises you immediately. Outside, warm air wrapped around your body like a blanket. Inside, a pleasant coolness greets your skin. It is not cold by modern standards. No hidden machine hums behind the walls. No magical breeze appears from nowhere. The room simply feels comfortable. The floor beneath your bare feet is packed earth, smooth from years of careful sweeping. It feels refreshingly cool. Thick walls surround the room on every side, quietly blocking much of the growing heat outside. You pause for a moment. The silence feels deeper indoors. Only faint sounds drift through the doorway. Somewhere outside, a goat bleats. Children laugh briefly before their voices fade. A potter taps clay with steady rhythm. Everything seems softened by the protective walls. The smell inside is equally distinctive. Fresh bread lingers from breakfast. Dry reeds scent the woven sleeping mats. Clay storage jars contribute a faint earthy aroma. A little smoke remains from yesterday's cooking fire, though most has escaped through roof openings before dawn. Nothing feels overwhelming. Everything feels lived in. You notice that windows are surprisingly small. Some rooms have none at all. At first this seems strange. Surely larger openings would welcome more refreshing air. Not necessarily. Large windows also invite blazing sunlight. They allow walls and floors to absorb enormous amounts of heat throughout the day. Small openings limit that problem while still permitting enough ventilation to keep indoor air moving. Ancient builders understood balance. Some homes include tiny high openings near the roofline. Warm air naturally rises toward them before escaping outside. Cooler air enters through lower doorways or shaded openings. No one speaks about airflow using scientific language. Yet practical experience teaches exactly what works. Generations become the textbook. As your eyes adjust to the dim interior, you notice furniture standing several inches above the floor. Wooden stools, simple beds, and storage chests all leave space beneath them where cooler air circulates. Even ordinary objects contribute to comfort. A woman kneels beside a large clay jar tucked safely into the darkest corner of the room. She removes its lid and pours water into a small cup. Tiny droplets cling to the outside of the vessel. The jar itself feels unexpectedly cool. How is that possible? Many clay containers were slightly porous. A small amount of water slowly seeped through microscopic openings before evaporating from the surface. That evaporation removed heat, naturally cooling the remaining water inside. It is wonderfully clever. No complicated mechanism, just clay, water, and physics quietly working together thousands of years before anyone described evaporation in scientific terms. You take a careful sip. The water is pleasantly cool. Not icy, just enough to refresh both body and mind. Outside, sunlight now spills across the village lanes. Bright reflections dance from pale walls. Dust begins rising beneath passing sandals. You're grateful for the shelter surrounding you. Many Egyptian homes also featured flat roofs reached by simple stairways or ladders. During cooler evenings, families often climbed onto these rooftops to enjoy fresh air after sunset. Some may even have slept there during especially warm seasons. Though historians continue discussing how common rooftop sleeping actually was across different regions and periods, the evidence remains incomplete. Ancient life rarely leaves perfect records. Archaeologists recover walls, pottery, tools, and food remains far more easily than daily habits. They reconstruct ordinary routines by combining physical evidence with paintings, written records, and careful comparison. Sometimes the smallest clues matter most. You step into a small courtyard open to the sky. Sunlight reaches the ground here, yet surrounding walls create welcome shade for much of the day. Plants grow inside large pots. A fig tree spreads gentle branches overhead. Birdsong echoes softly. The air moves more freely than indoors. Courtyards served many practical purposes. Families prepared food, completed household tasks, and gathered together without standing directly beneath relentless sunlight. These open spaces created comfortable pockets where work and conversation could continue throughout much of the day. Shade becomes another room. One curious idea occasionally appears among researchers. Some wonder whether wealthy households deliberately sprinkled water across certain courtyard surfaces to produce additional cooling through evaporation. Direct archaeological proof remains limited, and historians still argue whether this practice occurred regularly or only occasionally. It is an intriguing possibility, whether true or not. Egyptians certainly understood that water transformed comfort wherever it appeared. You notice another thoughtful detail. Doorways rarely face the strongest afternoon sunlight directly. Narrow streets between neighbouring homes also cast long shadows over one another as the day progresses, instead of isolated buildings baking alone beneath open skies. Houses work together. Entire villages create shade. The design feels surprisingly modern. Of course, nobody here talks about sustainable architecture or passive cooling systems. They simply build according to knowledge passed from parents to children over countless generations. If something works, keep doing it. The wisdom accumulates quietly. You climb carefully onto a rooftop. The village spreads before you in every direction. Mud brick walls blend naturally into the surrounding landscape. Beyond the final houses, green farmland suddenly gives way to endless pale desert stretching toward distant shimmering hills. The contrast is breathtaking. Life and emptiness stand side by side. A warm breeze brushes across your face. It carries faint scents of dry earth, fresh reeds, and river water far below. Somewhere nearby, linen cloth flutters gently as it dries beneath the strengthening sun. The village remains calm. People continue moving steadily through their morning routines, protected not by luxury but by practical intelligence shaped over centuries of observation. Their homes are not accidental. Every wall has purpose. Every doorway matters. Every shaded corner offers relief earned through experience rather than excess. Soon the sun will climb much higher, and these humble houses will reveal just how brilliantly ordinary people learn to live alongside one of nature's greatest challenges. Tomorrow they will do exactly the same again, just as their grandparents once did, and perhaps their grandchildren will continue long after them. The village is fully awake now. Golden sunlight pours across the fields, catching the tops of date palms and turning the slow-moving Nile into a ribbon of liquid bronze. The pleasant coolness of dawn has quietly slipped away. You can still work comfortably, but everyone senses the invisible clock moving steadily toward the hottest hours. Nobody needs to check the time. The sun tells them everything. You step onto a narrow path leading between irrigated fields. Damp soil presses gently beneath your sandals. Tiny frogs leap into shallow canals as you pass. Dragonflies dart above the water, their wings flashing briefly before disappearing into the morning light. The air smells different here. Fresh mud, growing grain, a hint of sweet reeds. The fragrance is surprisingly rich for a civilization surrounded by desert. The Nile transforms this narrow valley into a green world that feels almost miraculous when compared with the endless sands beyond. Ahead of you, several farmers are already hard at work. They move with calm efficiency rather than frantic speed. One uses a wooden hoe to loosen soil around young plants. Another checks the flow of water through a narrow irrigation channel, carefully adjusting a small earthen barrier with his foot. Every movement has purpose. Nothing is wasted. Historians generally agree that agriculture depended upon careful management of both water and time. Crops could not simply be planted and forgotten. Fields demanded constant attention, especially as temperatures climbed throughout the day. You pause beside an older farmer whose face carries deep lines carved by decades beneath the Egyptian sun. Sweat glistens across his forehead, yet he shows no sign of discomfort. He wipes his brow with a strip of linen, takes a small drink from a clay vessel, then quietly returns to work. This rhythm is familiar. Work, pause, drink, continue, instead of exhausting themselves in sudden bursts of effort. Many labourers likely pace their energy carefully. The desert rewards patience more than haste. A person who rushes through the cool morning may find little strength left once midday arrives. The lesson is simple. Respect the heat. Nearby, a pair of oxen slowly pull a wooden plough through soft earth. Their steady breathing mixes with the gentle creak of leather harnesses. Birds follow behind, eagerly searching for insects uncovered by each fresh furrow. Even the animals know the routine. They work while the morning remains forgiving. As the sun climbs higher, many tasks will slow or shift entirely. You continue toward another part of the village where craftsmen have already begun their own day. A potter sits beside a spinning wheel, shaping damp clay into elegant jars with practiced hands. The wet earth feels cool beneath his fingers despite the warming air. His concentration never breaks. The wheel hums softly beside him. Rows of unfinished vessels wait patiently beneath shaded coverings. They will dry gradually before facing the stronger heat needed to harden them completely. Timing matters here too. Too much direct sunlight too quickly could damage freshly shaped clay. Even pottery must adapt to the desert. Across the lane, a carpenter smooths wooden boards with careful strokes. The scent of freshly cut timber drifts gently through the air, mixing with dust and warm reeds. Wood is relatively scarce in Egypt, making every piece valuable. Waste is almost unthinkable. Each shaving matters. Nothing disappears casually. Children carry baskets between workshops, learning practical skills simply by watching adults repeat familiar tasks. There are no formal classrooms surrounding them this morning. Their education unfolds naturally through observation, imitation, and countless quiet corrections. Knowledge passes hand to hand. One young boy attempts to lift a basket nearly as large as himself. He manages only a few careful steps before laughing as an older sister gently steadies the load. Nobody scolds him. Learning takes time. The village understands this well. As you wander farther, the sounds of commerce begin replacing those of farming. A merchant carefully arranges woven baskets filled with onions, beans, garlic, and fresh dates. Another displays bundles of linen folded with remarkable precision. Buyers arrive gradually, making purchases before afternoon heat discourages unnecessary travel. Business follows the weather. Shade becomes valuable real estate. Many sellers position themselves where nearby buildings provide protection from direct sunlight for part of the morning. Customers naturally gather wherever comfort allows conversation to last a little longer. You notice how frequently people stop for small drinks rather than long rests. Clay cups pass quietly between hands. Water disappears slowly, never hurriedly. Some workers enjoy light beer made from grain. a common beverage that was often safer to consume than untreated water stored for long periods. Modern expectations sometimes miss this detail. Ancient beer usually contained much less alcohol than many people imagine. It functioned as an ordinary daily drink rather than an invitation to reckless celebration. Practicality always comes first. A pleasant breeze suddenly moves through the village, lifting loose strands of linen and stirring fine dust across the path. For several wonderful moments, everyone seems to breathe a little more deeply. The relief is brief. Still, everyone appreciates it. Nature offers small gifts. You reach a group of stoneworkers shaping blocks destined for a nearby building project. Their tools strike rhythmic patterns that echo across the open space. Tap, tap, tap. The steady sound feels almost musical, contrary to popular imagination. Not every construction project involved endless suffering beneath unbearable conditions. Archaeological evidence suggests organized labor often included planned schedules, food supplies, water access, and periods of rest, especially for skilled workers whose experience could not easily be replaced. Healthy workers remained productive workers. That was simply good planning. Historians continue debating exactly how labor schedules varied between royal projects, local construction, and agricultural seasons. Conditions almost certainly differed depending upon location, political leadership, available resources, and the specific period of Egyptian history. The past rarely follows one simple rule. One curious tradition appears in several ancient artistic scenes. Servants are sometimes shown carrying large fans made from feathers or woven fibers. Whether these fans provided significant cooling or mainly symbolized status remains uncertain in many cases. Scholars still discuss how frequently ordinary households enjoyed such comforts outside elite settings. Even a little breeze feels luxurious. The sun now stands noticeably higher overhead. Bright light reflects from pale walls until the village seems almost aglow. You can feel warmth building beneath your sandals each time you cross open ground. People notice it too. Conversations become shorter. Movements grow more deliberate. Nobody panics. There is no need. This transformation happens every day. The Egyptians have arranged their lives around it with remarkable patience. The most demanding tasks have already been completed. Lighter work continues beneath patches of shade. Others prepare for a slower pace until evening eventually restores cooler air. Adaptation becomes routine. You realize something quietly remarkable. No one here speaks about conquering nature. They simply cooperate with it. The sun cannot be defeated. The desert cannot be argued with. The wisest choice is to understand both, adjusting every habit until survival becomes almost effortless through repetition. As another warm breeze passes across the fields, carrying the scent of grain ready for harvest, you continue your walk toward the life-giving river that has quietly supported every hour of this carefully balanced morning. The path gently slopes toward the Nile, and almost without noticing, you begin walking a little faster. The morning has matured into late morning. Warm air now rests comfortably across your shoulders, and the first hints of true afternoon heat are beginning to announce themselves. Everyone seems drawn toward the river. That is hardly surprising. Without the Nile, the village behind you would simply disappear into dust. The sound reaches you before the water itself. Gentle waves lap against muddy banks. Wooden boats creak softly as they rock with the slow current. Reeds sway together, brushing one another with a whisper that almost resembles quiet conversation. The river feels alive. It smells alive too. Fresh water carries the scent of wet earth, green plants, and rich black silt left behind by countless annual floods. Mixed with these are faint aromas of fish, damp wood, and woven reeds drying beneath the strengthening sun. It is strangely comforting. You kneel near the edge and dip your fingers into the water. Cool? Wonderfully cool. For a brief moment the warmth disappears from your skin. Tiny ripples spread across the surface, reflecting patches of brilliant blue sky. broken by drifting white birds searching for breakfast. The Nile never rushes. Its calmness seems contagious. Nearby, several women carefully fill large clay jars. They lower each vessel slowly into the water, allowing it to fill without disturbing too much mud from the bottom. Lifting a full jar requires practiced balance more than great strength. One woman places a folded cloth upon her head. The jar rests securely above it. With graceful posture, she begins the walk home, hardly spilling a drop despite the uneven path beneath her feet. You quickly understand that collecting water is not a dramatic event. It is simply another daily rhythm. Every household repeats it. Every generation learns it. Historians generally agree that access to fresh water shaped nearly every aspect of Egyptian life. Drinking, cooking, cleaning, brewing, pottery making, brick production, farming, and livestock all depended upon reliable access to the river or carefully stored supplies drawn from it. Water was ordinary, yet it was priceless. A fisherman pushes his narrow boat gently away from shore using a long wooden pole. The vessel glides almost silently through patches of floating vegetation. Nets lie neatly folded beside him, smelling faintly of damp rope and river reeds. His movements are unhurried. Fish are most active during certain hours, and experienced fishermen understand these patterns almost instinctively, like farmers. They work with nature instead of against it. Timing brings success. You notice another detail. Very few people stand in direct sunlight longer than necessary. Conversations often happen beneath clusters of palms or beside mud brick walls casting narrow strips of shade. Even while collecting water, people naturally shift position whenever a cooler place becomes available. Shade is never ignored. It is quietly appreciated. Children splash near the shallows under the watchful eyes of older family members. Their laughter echoes across the water while small fish dart between their ankles. The river is their playground, their classroom, their neighbour. They grow up understanding its moods long before learning complicated religious ceremonies or royal history. A gentle breeze drifts along the surface of the Nile. Immediately you feel the difference. The moving air carries moisture that softens the growing heat. Even a slight wind seems wonderfully refreshing after standing on dry ground only moments earlier. No wonder villages gathered close to the river whenever possible. Nature provides its own cooling system. Several men are unloading baskets from a trading boat that has recently arrived. Dates, onions, woven mats, pottery, bundles of flax, and sacks of grain pass carefully from one pair of hands to another. There is no shouting, no frantic pace. Everything unfolds with quiet coordination. A donkey waits patiently beneath the shade of a tree, occasionally flicking its ears to chase away persistent flies. Even the animals seem to understand that conserving energy during warmer hours is simply common sense. You walk farther along the bank until you reach a cluster of enormous clay jars partially buried in the ground outside a modest storage building. Curious, you step closer. The jars remain surprisingly cool to the touch, despite standing beneath the bright Egyptian sky. Partly burying storage vessels helped shield them from rapid temperature changes. Combined with thick clay walls and shaded placement, this simple technique helped preserve water and food for longer periods. Nothing is accidental. Practical knowledge hides everywhere. You watch as one elderly man carefully pours water from a large storage jar into several smaller containers destined for nearby households. Not a single drop is wasted. Water splashes onto the ground only rarely, and whenever it does, someone instinctively smooths damp soil across the spot, rather than allowing precious moisture to disappear uselessly. Respect becomes habit. Some ancient texts suggest that clean water also carried symbolic importance beyond simple survival. It appeared in religious rituals, temple ceremonies, and acts of purification performed before approaching sacred places. Practical needs and spiritual beliefs often flow together, rather like the river itself. One curious tradition occasionally mentioned by historians proposes that certain households placed fragrant flowers or aromatic leaves into storage areas where water jars stood. Whether this noticeably improved the taste or merely freshened surrounding air remains uncertain. Archaeological evidence offers intriguing hints but no complete answer. The idea certainly sounds pleasant. Imagine drawing cool water scented very lightly with fresh plants after working beneath the desert sun. It would feel almost luxurious. As midday approaches, activity along the river begins changing. Some boats head back toward shaded moorings. Fishermen check their catches before the strongest heat arrives. Families finish carrying water home. The pace gradually softens. Nobody announces the transition. Everyone simply understands. Historians still debate exactly how much water ordinary Egyptians drank during especially hot seasons. Ancient written records rarely describe such everyday details directly, leaving researchers to estimate needs based upon climate, physical labor, diet, and modern physiological studies. Some mysteries remain wonderfully ordinary. Not every historical puzzle involves hidden tombs. Sometimes it concerns a simple cup of water. You sit beneath a spreading date palm overlooking the river. Its rough trunk feels warm against your back, while broad leaves above filter sunlight into shifting patterns across the ground. A kingfisher suddenly dives. Moments later it emerges holding a tiny fish before disappearing downstream. Life continues effortlessly. The Nile seems to breathe with quiet confidence. Its waters nourish crops, cool villages, feed families, support trade, and offer moments of peaceful escape from the growing furnace surrounding the valley. Without saying a word, the river teaches perhaps the greatest lesson of ancient Egypt. Survival does not always depend upon fighting harsh environments. Sometimes it depends upon recognizing one generous gift within them and organizing an entire civilization around its steady rhythm. You rise slowly and brush fine sand from your sandals. Ahead, the sun climbs ever higher, promising an afternoon that will test both patience and ingenuity. Fortunately, the people around you have spent countless generations preparing for exactly that challenge. By now the morning has almost surrendered to midday. The sunlight feels brighter than ever, washing the village in pale gold until every mud brick wall seems to shimmer. The pleasant breeze from the river still appears from time to time, but it no longer carries enough strength to keep the heat at bay. You feel it immediately. The air has changed. It no longer brushes gently across your skin. It settles upon you instead. Yet as you look around, nobody appears especially distressed. The villagers continue with their day in calm, measured fashion, moving as though they have reached an understanding with the desert many centuries ago. Perhaps they have. The first thing you notice is clothing. Almost everyone wears linen. Not thick wool, not heavy leather, certainly not layers upon layers of fabric. The cloth hangs loosely around shoulders, arms, and legs, allowing every passing breeze to circulate freely. Even when the wind is barely noticeable, the fabric shifts gently, preventing heat from becoming trapped against the body. It is wonderfully practical. Historians generally agree that flax, grown in the fertile Nile Valley, became the primary source of linen throughout ancient Egyptian history. Skilled weavers produced cloth ranging from coarse everyday garments to astonishingly fine fabrics reserved for wealthy families and temple officials. The material feels surprisingly soft. You gently touch the sleeve of a farmer passing nearby. The linen is light, smooth, and cool compared with the surrounding air. It does not cling heavily after perspiration, allowing moisture to evaporate more easily. The difference is remarkable. Simple fabric, extraordinary comfort. Nearby, a woman adjusts a long white dress that reaches almost to her ankles. Its folds catch sunlight beautifully without appearing cumbersome. A woven belt gathers the fabric comfortably around her waist, leaving enough room for easy movement. Children wear even simpler clothing. Many wear very little during the hottest months. No one seems embarrassed. The climate itself dictates practicality. As you continue walking, another detail catches your attention. Hair. Many men keep their hair closely cropped. Some shave their heads entirely. Several women wear neatly arranged hairstyles, while others appear to have carefully fitted wigs prepared from human hair or plant fibers. At first, the wigs seem curious. Why wear extra hair in such heat? The answer is more sensible than you might expect. Natural hair trapped dust, sweat, and insects during long working days. Shaving the head made cleanliness much easier. While removable wigs offered protection from sunlight during important occasions before being taken off whenever comfort required, a clever compromise, appearance and practicality worked together. You notice one elderly craftsman carefully wiping his smooth scalp with a damp cloth before returning to work beneath a shaded awning. The gesture seems wonderfully refreshing. Soon you discover another familiar sight. Small jars. They appear almost everywhere. Some contain scented oils. Others hold fragrant ointments. These were far more than simple cosmetics. Oils helped protect skin from drying beneath relentless sunlight while also masking the smells naturally produced during long, hot days. The fragrance drifts gently through the warm air. You recognize hints of flowers, perhaps a little resin, maybe crushed herbs. The scent feels clean without becoming overpowering. Ancient Egyptians appreciated pleasant aromas deeply. Heat intensified both delightful and unpleasant smells, making fragrant oils surprisingly valuable in daily life. Even comfort could smell beautiful. One curious custom described in artistic scenes shows elegant guests wearing cone-shaped pieces upon their heads during banquets. These cones were traditionally believed to contain scented fat that slowly melted, releasing perfume throughout the evening. It certainly sounds dramatic. Modern researchers, however, continue debating exactly how these cones functioned. Some historians believe they truly existed. Others suggest artists used them symbolically rather than literally. Recent archaeological discoveries have strengthened the argument that real perfumed cones may indeed have been worn on certain occasions, though many questions remain unanswered. History occasionally surprises everyone. You pause beside a family preparing to leave home. Each person takes only what seems necessary. A woven basket, a clay water vessel, simple sandals, nothing excessive. Those sandals deserve closer attention. Made from woven reeds, leather, or plant fibers depending upon wealth and availability, they shield feet from burning ground while remaining light enough for long walks. You glance toward an open patch of sunlit earth. The surface already looks painfully hot. Bare feet would quickly regret such a decision. A young girl laughs as she carefully shakes sand from one sandal before slipping it back onto her foot. Small routines become lifelong habits. The village streets continue filling with gentle activity. Yet nobody rushes. Loose clothing sways with every measured step. Bright linen reflects much of the sunlight instead of absorbing it. White dominates. Cream follows. Light colours quietly defeat heat. This practical choice likely offered noticeable advantages long before anyone understood the science of reflected solar radiation. Observation came first, explanation arrived much later. As you pass another shaded courtyard, several women sit together spinning flax into thread. Their fingers move steadily while conversation flows as naturally as the nearby river. The spinning wheel hums softly. Birds chirp overhead. Somewhere beyond the courtyard wall, a donkey brays with unmistakable determination. Life feels peaceful, even beneath a blazing sky. You notice that many people cover their shoulders rather than exposing every part of their skin. This seems slightly surprising at first. Would less clothing not feel cooler? Sometimes. Yet direct sunlight can become even more exhausting than warm fabric. Loose garments create small pockets of moving air while protecting skin from constant exposure. The balance matters. Too much covering traps heat. Too little invites the sun. Centuries of experience found the middle ground. Historians still discuss exactly how clothing styles differed among farming communities scattered across Upper and Lower Egypt. Paintings, sculptures, and surviving textiles provide valuable clues. But everyday garments made from ordinary materials often disappear long before archaeologists uncover them. The simplest clothing leaves the fewest traces. Fortunately, careful artwork fills many of those gaps. You stop beneath another sycamore tree where several labourers enjoy a brief rest before returning to lighter afternoon tasks. Nobody collapses dramatically. Nobody complains. One man quietly removes his sandals, allowing his feet to cool against shaded earth for a few precious moments. Another pours a small amount of water across his hands before rubbing away dust collected throughout the morning. Simple comforts, quiet pleasures. The heat has become impossible to ignore now, yet the village continues functioning with remarkable calm. Clothing, hairstyles, sandals, oils, and daily habits all work together like pieces of a carefully designed system. No single trick defeats the desert. Many small ones do. You begin to appreciate that ancient Egyptian fashion was never merely about appearance. Every thread of linen, every woven sandal, every shaved head, and every fragrant oil reflected thousands of years spent learning how to live gracefully beneath one of the world's most powerful suns. And as the afternoon edges ever closer, another challenge quietly awaits, preparing food without turning an already hot day into an unbearable one. By the time you reach the heart of the village again, the sun stands high above the Nile. The light is almost dazzling now. Pale walls glow beneath its brilliance, and even the smallest stones seem to radiate warmth back into the air. You instinctively seek shade. So does everyone else. The streets have grown quieter than they were only a few hours earlier. Most of the heavy work is finished for the day, replaced by gentler routines carried out beneath awnings, inside courtyards, or behind thick mud brick walls. The village has not slowed because people are lazy. It has slowed because people are wise. A wonderful smell greets you long before you reach the kitchens. Fresh bread, roasted onions, warm herbs, something sweet that reminds you of ripe dates. The aromas drift lazily through shaded lanes, mixing with the earthy scent of clay ovens and the faint fragrance of smoke that escaped much earlier in the morning. Your stomach notices immediately. You follow the scent toward a modest household where several family members are preparing the day's main meal. The courtyard offers welcome protection from direct sunlight. Above, woven reed screens soften the harsh brightness, allowing patches of gentle light to dance across the ground. Even cooking happens thoughtfully. Nothing is accidental. A woman kneels beside a rounded clay oven built waist-high from mud and straw. Its outside feels warm, but not fiercely hot. Most of the baking was completed much earlier, while the air remained cooler. Historians generally agree that many Egyptian households preferred to finish the hottest cooking tasks during the morning whenever possible. Baking bread before midday reduced unnecessary heat inside living spaces, while allowing fresh loaves to remain available throughout the day. The timing makes perfect sense. Why fight the afternoon? Nearby, another family member carefully slices vegetables using a small copper knife polished from years of use. Cucumbers, onions, beans, and leafy greens rest inside woven baskets waiting their turn. The colours look beautiful. Bright green, soft white, deep golden brown. Simple food often appears surprisingly appealing. Egyptian meals usually relied upon ingredients grown close to home. Bread formed the foundation of nearly every table. Alongside it came vegetables, fruit, fish from the Nile, beans, lentils, and occasionally meat during festivals or special occasions. Daily meals favoured practicality. Luxury remained rare. You notice several enormous storage jars standing against the coolest wall of the courtyard. Each has been covered carefully with woven lids to protect food from insects, dust, and the relentless sunshine. One jar contains grain, another stores dried beans, a third holds dates gathered during harvest. Every container has its place. Nothing seems randomly arranged. You lift the lid of one vessel just enough to peek inside. The air escaping feels noticeably cooler than the afternoon outside. Thick clay walls continue doing their quiet work, protecting valuable supplies from rapid changes in temperature. Ancient storage required patience, not electricity. A gentle breeze enters the courtyard, carrying with it the pleasant smell of the nearby river. Loose linen curtains flutter softly across a doorway before settling once again. The moment lasts only seconds. Still, everyone enjoys it. You watch as flat circles of dough are carefully shaped by experienced hands, Each movement is smooth and confident. Flour dust floats gently through shafts of sunlight, creating tiny golden clouds before settling onto wooden boards. The rhythm feels almost hypnotic. Press, turn, flatten, repeat. Bread was far more than a side dish. It was the centerpiece of everyday nourishment. Archaeologists have uncovered astonishing numbers of ancient bread molds, ovens, and grinding stones, revealing just how central baking became throughout Egyptian history. An entire civilization rose on bread and the river. In another corner of the courtyard, two children patiently grind grain between heavy stones. Their movements are slow but steady. A fine powder gradually gathers beneath the upper stone with every careful rotation. The task requires endurance, not speed. You notice the children's mother quietly encouraging them without rushing. Everyone understands that flour prepared carefully produces better bread. Good food rewards patience. Nearby, a pot simmers gently over a small controlled fire. Unlike dramatic flames you might imagine, the fire remains surprisingly modest. Large fires create unnecessary heat. Small fires accomplish the same task. Fuel itself was valuable. Wood remained relatively scarce across much of Egypt, encouraging efficient cooking whenever possible. Dried reeds, branches, animal dung, and agricultural waste often supplemented precious timber. Nothing useful went to waste. Even fire demanded planning. The simmering pot releases the comforting aroma of lentils mixed with herbs. The fragrance spreads slowly through the shaded courtyard without overwhelming the senses. Simple ingredients, rich flavor. One elderly grandmother tastes the mixture using a small wooden spoon before adding a handful of crushed herbs from a nearby basket. No written recipe appears. Memory guides every choice. Historians still debate the exact combinations of herbs commonly used in ordinary village cooking. Archaeological evidence identifies many plants, but reconstructing precise daily recipes remained surprisingly difficult. People rarely recorded familiar meals. They simply prepared them. One particularly intriguing discovery comes from residues preserved inside ancient pottery. Scientists occasionally identify traces of oils, grains, fruits, spices, or fermented beverages that reveal forgotten culinary habits. Yet each new discovery also raises fresh questions. Ancient kitchens still keep secrets. As the afternoon heat grows stronger, you notice something interesting. Nobody seems eager to prepare enormous feasts. Meals remain sensible. Heavy eating beneath intense heat would likely leave anyone feeling sluggish. Instead, modest portions combined with regular nourishment appear far more practical. Comfort matters. Energy matters too. Outside the courtyard, village streets have become noticeably quieter. Many doors remain open just enough to encourage airflow while keeping interiors shaded. Dogs nap beneath carts. Cats stretch lazily across cool patches of earth, apparently convinced they invented relaxation itself. Watching them is strangely reassuring. Perhaps they have the right idea. You sit beside one of the cool storage jars and accept a small piece of freshly baked bread. The crust feels warm against your fingers while the inside remains wonderfully soft. The taste is simple, nutty, satisfying. A few fresh dates complete the meal with gentle sweetness. Nothing extravagant appears on the table. Nothing needs to. The food reflects the landscape itself. Honest, practical, nourishing, and carefully adapted to the realities of desert life. As the meal ends, clay dishes are washed using surprisingly small amounts of water. Every splash is measured. Every remaining crumb finds another purpose. Perhaps for livestock or tomorrow's cooking. Waste belongs nowhere. Not here, not in this climate. You leave the peaceful courtyard just as another warm gust drifts through the village. The hottest part of the day has finally arrived. The streets shimmer softly beneath the brilliant sun, and only the most necessary work continues outdoors. Yet somewhere beyond the quiet houses, skilled labourers still remain beneath the open sky, finding remarkable ways to endure conditions that many travellers would consider impossible. The afternoon sun now rules the sky completely. The cool freshness of dawn feels like a distant memory, almost imagined. Heat rises from the ground in gentle, shimmering waves, making distant palm trees appear to dance against the horizon. Even breathing feels different. The air is dry, heavy, almost perfectly still. You leave the comforting shade of the village and follow a dusty path toward a busy construction site beyond the cultivated fields. The walk itself reminds you why most people plan their day so carefully. The sunlight is relentless. Every exposed stone seems determined to reflect it. Yet ahead, dozens of workers continue their tasks with remarkable calm. They are not rushing. They are not competing. They simply move with steady confidence born from long experience. You soon realize that endurance is less about strength than rhythm. That lesson appears everywhere. The first sound reaching your ears is the steady tapping of stone tools. Tap, tap, tap. The repeated rhythm echoes across the worksite without ever becoming hurried. Mixed with it are quiet conversations, the occasional snort of an ox, and the scrape of wooden sledges moving across prepared ground. No one wastes energy shouting. Voices remain low. The atmosphere feels surprisingly organized. Historians generally agree that large Egyptian building projects depended upon careful planning rather than endless frantic labor. Whether constructing temples, tombs, canals, or administrative buildings, experienced supervisors understood that exhausted workers accomplished very little. Even ambitious rulers could not command the sun. Nature always had the final word. You approach a team shaping limestone blocks beneath a simple shelter made from wooden poles and woven reeds. The shade is not perfect, but it immediately lowers the harshness of the afternoon. One mason kneels beside a block, carefully smoothing its surface with rhythmic precision. Tiny white flakes drift into the air before settling quietly around his sandals. Stone dust coats everything. His hands, his clothing, even his eyebrows, yet his movements remain relaxed. Nearby, another craftsman pauses to drink from a cool clay jar resting beneath the shelter. He takes only a few measured sips before replacing the lid and returning the vessel to its shaded corner. The water is shared, respectfully. Nobody drinks carelessly. You remember the cool jars you saw beside the Nile earlier. Every thoughtful habit connects with another. The village, the river, the homes. And now this worksite all rely upon the same careful understanding of heat. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything supports everything else. Several labourers prepare to move an enormous stone block using a wooden sledge. Thick rope stretched tightly between the men. The supervisor quietly gives instructions with calm gestures rather than loud commands. Everyone waits. Then together they pull. The heavy stone begins sliding across the prepared path surprisingly smoothly. Archaeological evidence suggests that workers sometimes poured water onto the sand ahead of sledges. Damp sand reduced friction, making massive loads easier to move. Reliefs from ancient tombs even depict people carrying water before large statues during transport. It seems almost unbelievable, yet modern experiments have shown that the method truly works. Sometimes ancient solutions outperform modern expectations. A faint breeze suddenly passes across the open ground. Every worker seems to notice it immediately. Faces lift slightly, shoulders relax. The smallest wind becomes a gift. It lasts perhaps 30 seconds. Then the stillness returns. You glance toward the horizon where the desert stretches endlessly beyond the green ribbon of cultivated land. The contrast remains astonishing. Green life, golden emptiness. Only a narrow strip separates them. A young apprentice carefully carries bronze chisels wrapped inside a linen cloth. The tools are precious and well maintained. Before handing one to an experienced mason, he wipes away fine dust with practiced care. Tools deserve respect. They are difficult to replace. Nearby, several workers repair damaged wooden handles while sitting beneath another shaded shelter. Not every task requires standing beneath direct sunlight. Maintenance often happens during the hottest hours because it allows progress without exhausting the body. The schedule itself conserves energy. That may be the greatest tool of all. The smell around the worksite is different from the village. Instead of fresh bread and herbs, you notice warm limestone, dry wood, leather ropes, and human sweat softened by scented oils. It is not unpleasant, just honest. This is the smell of work. You watch one elderly stonecutter pause beside a young apprentice. Rather than criticizing, he quietly demonstrates a smoother way to guide the chisel across the rock. One strike, another. The apprentice immediately understands. Knowledge passes silently. That scene reminds you that Egyptian craftsmanship depended upon generations of patient teaching. Great monuments were built not only by strong hands, but by experienced minds willing to share their skills. Every master once began as a beginner. Some scholars continue debating exactly how labour was organised on different royal projects. Earlier generations often imagined enormous armies of enslaved workers building every monument. Modern archaeological discoveries paint a more complex picture. Evidence from workers' villages suggests that many skilled labourers received food, housing, medical care and organised support, particularly on major state projects. The truth appears richer than old legends. History often grows more interesting as myths fade. A curious story occasionally appears in later writings claiming that experienced builders could judge approaching changes in weather simply by observing distant hills and the colour of the afternoon sky. Whether this skill was truly widespread remains uncertain, but historians acknowledge that people living outdoors every day likely notice subtle environmental clues unfamiliar to occasional visitors. Observation becomes instinct. You step inside a nearby shelter where several finished stone blocks wait for the transport. The temperature changes immediately. Thick woven roofing blocks much of the fierce sunlight overhead. The shade feels wonderful, almost luxurious. Even here, however, no one remains idle for long. Workers sharpen tools, repair ropes, inspect sledges, or prepare tomorrow's materials. Useful work never truly stops. It simply changes form. A swallow darts through the shelter entrance, circles once above your head, then disappears back into the brilliant afternoon light. Its sudden appearance makes everyone smile. Even small moments brighten long days. You begin noticing something remarkable. Despite the demanding conditions, there's very little wasted movement. People bend only when necessary. They carry sensible loads. They pause before exhaustion replaces judgment. Efficiency becomes survival, not merely productivity. The sun has now reached its fiercest point, yet the worksite continues with calm determination rather than desperate effort. Every routine has been refined across generations until surviving the desert no longer depends upon extraordinary toughness. It depends upon ordinary wisdom repeated faithfully. As you leave the stoneworkers behind, the shimmering heat stretches across the landscape ahead, somewhere beyond those distant fields. Another group of companions has been adapting to the Egyptian sun just as successfully. They walk on four legs. Some fly overhead. Others wait quietly beside the river. The animals of ancient Egypt have learned many of the same lessons. Leaving the busy worksite behind, you return toward the greener edges of the Nile Valley. The afternoon remains intensely warm, yet the landscape feels softer here. Date palms cast long patches of welcome shade across dusty paths, while irrigation canals quietly carry cool water through fields of grain and vegetables. Life seems to gather wherever water flows. Not only human life, animal life as well. A gentle lowing reaches your ears before you see the cattle. Several cows stand knee-deep in a shallow pond beside an irrigation channel, barely moving except for the occasional lazy flick of a tail. They have discovered the best place in the village. You cannot blame them. The cool water protects their legs from the afternoon heat while keeping troublesome insects away. Their breathing is slow and steady. Every now and then one lifts its head, chews thoughtfully, and returns to its peaceful routine. Animals understand comfort remarkably well. Ancient Egyptians certainly noticed. Historians generally agree that livestock represented one of a family's greatest sources of wealth. Cattle provided milk, labour, leather, and status. Oxen pulled ploughs across fertile fields, goats supplied milk in drier areas, sheep offered wool in limited quantities. Although linen remained the dominant textile for clothing, healthy animals meant secure households. Their care was never an afterthought. You continue along the canal where several donkeys patiently wait beside loaded baskets, unlike horses, which became common much later. Donkeys formed the dependable backbone of Egyptian transportation for thousands of years. They carry grain, clay jars, building materials, bundles of reeds, almost anything people require. One grey donkey stands perfectly still beneath a sycamore tree while its owner adjusts the straps across its back. The animal seems entirely unconcerned by the delay. Patience appears to be another survival skill. Nearby, a young boy gently pours a little water into a shallow stone basin. Two donkeys immediately lower their heads to drink. Slowly, quietly, nobody rushes them. You notice how carefully water is measured even for animals, enough to keep them healthy. Never so much that precious supplies are wasted. Practical kindness fills the scene. The path bends toward a marshy stretch where reeds sway gently in the afternoon breeze. Birdsong suddenly grows louder. White egrets stalk patiently through shallow water, while colourful kingfishers dart across the surface like tiny blue arrows. A heron stands perfectly still. Minutes pass. Then with astonishing speed, its beak flashes downward. Dinner is secured. The river provides for everyone. Egyptian artists love depicting birds in remarkable detail, and archaeologists have identified many of the same species still visiting the Nile today. Watching them now, you understand why ancient painters devoted such careful attention to feathers, wings, and graceful movements. Nature offered endless inspiration. The breeze carries a mixture of scents: wet reeds, fresh mud, warm grass, a faint sweetness from flowering plants growing near the water, after hours spent beneath dry desert air. These fragrances feel wonderfully refreshing. You pause beside a fisherman repairing woven nets while several ducks paddle peacefully nearby. The man occasionally glances toward the birds with quiet amusement. They know where the fish are. Perhaps he is learning from them. Observation works both ways. Farther downstream, a small herd of goats explores the edge of cultivated land. Unlike the patient cattle, the goats seem endlessly curious. They nibble leaves, investigate baskets, and occasionally test whether someone's unattended laundry might also qualify as food. One goat receives a gentle nudge away from a vegetable patch. It appears completely unoffended. Cats are everywhere. At first you notice only one sleeping beneath a wooden cart. Then another appears atop a mud brick wall. Soon you begin seeing them throughout the village, watching, stretching, yawning magnificently. Ancient Egyptians admired cats for very practical reasons. They hunted mice, rats, and snakes that threatened grain supplies and household safety. Over time, they also became deeply respected within Egyptian culture, eventually gaining important religious associations. They earned their reputation honestly. One sleek cat slips silently into a storage building. Moments later, it emerges with unmistakable satisfaction written across its face. Mission accomplished. You suspect the village granary has one fewer mouse. Not far away, dogs rest in shaded corners beside family homes. Their ears twitch occasionally at passing sounds, but they wisely conserve energy during the hottest part of the day. Even guardians understand afternoon strategy. Sleep now, work later. Historians continue debating exactly how different breeds of dogs served Egyptian households. Wall paintings show hunting dogs, guard dogs, and beloved companions, suggesting that relationships between people and dogs varied widely depending upon circumstance. Some mysteries wag their tails. A curious buzzing interrupts your thoughts. Bees. Several hives stand beneath simple shelters near a flowering garden. The insects move busily between blossoms despite the warmth. Ancient Egyptians valued honey enormously. It sweetened food, appeared in medicines, and played roles in religious offerings. Bees therefore enjoyed careful protection. Tiny creatures, great importance. The gentle hum creates a soothing background as you continue walking. Then the atmosphere changes. The reeds grow taller. The water becomes deeper. Conversation among nearby villagers suddenly grows quieter. You already know why. A crocodile rests motionless along the opposite bank. Only its eyes seem alive. The great reptile hardly moves, blending almost perfectly with mud and reeds. Birds continue singing as though nothing unusual has happened. Perhaps for them it is ordinary. For you, it is unforgettable. The crocodile reminds everyone that the Nile gave life while demanding respect. Fishermen, children, and travellers all learned where danger might appear. No one challenged it carelessly. The river deserved humility. One intriguing belief occasionally mentioned by historians suggests that people sometimes observe the behaviour of birds, fish, or crocodiles when judging seasonal changes along the Nile. Whether these observations formed organised systems or simply reflected practical experience remains uncertain. The evidence remains incomplete. Nature keeps some lessons to itself. As the afternoon slowly begins its long journey toward evening, shadows lengthen across fields and canals. The harsh white glare softens almost imperceptibly. Livestock gradually become more active. Birds fill the air once again with cheerful calls. Even the breeze feels cooler, only slightly, but enough to notice. You realize that animals and humans have been following remarkably similar daily rhythms all along. Rest during intense heat. Seek water whenever possible. Treasure shade. Move with purpose rather than haste. No one taught these lessons formally. The landscape itself became the teacher. As you leave the marsh behind, the distant roofs of temples begin appearing beyond the palms. Their enormous stone walls wait patiently beneath the afternoon sun, hiding cool interiors that have offered relief to generations of priests, travellers, and ordinary villagers alike. The comforting sounds of the Nile slowly fade behind you as your footsteps carry you toward the edge of a cultivated land. At first, the transition feels almost gentle. Green fields become smaller, date palms appear less often, irrigation canals narrow until they disappear altogether. Then the landscape changes completely. The fertile valley ends. The desert begins. It happens with surprising suddenness. One moment your sandals press into dark, moist soil. The next they crunch across pale sand and scattered stones warmed by countless afternoons beneath the Egyptian sun. You pause instinctively. The silence feels enormous. Back near the river, life filled every direction with quiet movement. Birds called from the reeds. Farmers spoke across their fields. Water whispered through narrow channels. Out here, almost nothing speaks. Only the wind. A faint current of warm air slips across the open landscape, carrying tiny grains of sand that lightly brush against your ankles. The breeze smells different too. No wet earth, no growing plants, only warm stone, dry dust, and endless sunlight. You suddenly understand why ancient Egyptians regarded the desert with both respect and caution. It is beautiful. It is unforgiving. Historians generally agree that most Egyptians spent their lives close to the narrow green ribbon of the Nile Valley. Beyond it stretched immense deserts that were difficult to cross without careful planning. Experienced guides, reliable animals, and adequate water supplies. The river was home. The desert was another world. You continue walking along a well-worn path used by traders, quarry workers, and travellers for generations. The surface beneath your sandals has been hardened by countless footsteps. Every few hundred yards, scattered stones mark the route where shifting sands might otherwise erase it. Navigation requires attention. The landscape rarely offers obvious landmarks. Ahead, low rocky hills shimmer beneath the afternoon heat. Their outlines blur slightly as hot air rises from the ground. For a moment they almost seem to float. The desert enjoys small illusions. You notice that even the sunlight feels different here, without trees, fields, or water to soften its intensity. Every ray seems stronger. Bright reflections bounce from pale rock until you instinctively narrow your eyes. Shade becomes precious. Unfortunately, there is very little of it. Eventually you discover a large weathered boulder casting a narrow strip of shadow across the ground. You step gratefully into it. The temperature changes immediately, only by a few degrees, yet the relief feels extraordinary. Ancient travellers certainly appreciated such places. Small pauses could make long journeys far more manageable. Nearby, a caravan of donkeys slowly approaches along the dusty track. Their loads are balanced carefully beneath woven coverings protecting valuable goods from both sunlight and blowing sand. The animals move steadily, never quickly. The merchants walking beside them wear loose linen garments similar to those you've already seen throughout the villages. Several cover their heads with light cloths that shield faces from direct sunlight without trapping excessive heat. Experience shapes every decision. One merchant pauses beside you beneath the shared shade of the rock. He removes a clay water flask hanging from his shoulder and takes a measured drink. Not too much, just enough. Then he securely replaces the stopper before continuing. Water is planned, never assumed. You watch the caravan disappear slowly into the shimmering distance, until both people and animals become little more than moving shadows against endless pale hills. The silence returns. A small desert lizard suddenly darts across the path, disappearing beneath another stone before you can take a second look. Life exists here, just carefully hidden. Several hardy shrubs cling stubbornly to cracks in the rocky ground. Their leaves appear small and thick, conserving every possible drop of moisture. Plants have adapted too. Everything here has. You continue climbing gently toward higher ground where the view opens dramatically behind you. The sight steals your attention. Far below stretches the Nile Valley, a brilliant green ribbon winding through vast golden emptiness. Villages appear like tiny islands surrounded not by water but by sand. The contrast feels almost unreal. It also explains everything. Without the Nile, there could never have been an Egyptian civilization. The desert makes that truth impossible to ignore. Many valuable resources actually came from these harsh landscapes. Quarries supplied limestone, sandstone, and granite used in monuments. Mines produced copper, gold, and precious stones. Expeditions regularly crossed difficult terrain despite the risks because the rewards justified the effort. The desert challenged people. It also enriched them. Historians still debate exactly how frequently ordinary villagers ventured far into these regions outside organized expeditions. Most evidence suggests that experienced specialists handled long desert journeys, while many farming communities remained close to the dependable river throughout their lives. The unknown remained unknown. For good reason. A curious ancient tradition tells of travelers carefully listening to the wind during lonely desert crossings. Some believed certain sounds carried warnings, while others simply recognized that changing winds often signaled shifting weather or approaching sand. Whether every story should be taken literally remains uncertain. Still, experienced travelers almost certainly paid close attention to the wind. Ignoring nature rarely ends well. As if determined to demonstrate the point, a stronger gust suddenly sweeps across the open plain. Fine sand lifts into the air, dancing around your legs before drifting onward. It is not dangerous, merely inconvenient. Even so, you instinctively turn your face away until the brief cloud passes. You imagine how much more difficult travel would become during a true sandstorm. The thought encourages gratitude for calm weather. Far ahead, faint outlines of ancient quarry faces emerge from the rocky hillsides. Workers once carved enormous stone blocks here before transporting them back toward the fertile valley using remarkable ingenuity and determination. Looking at those distant cliffs, you remember the masons from earlier in your journey. Their work began here. Everything connects. Stone from the desert, mud from the Nile, wood from distant forests, human skill joining every piece together. The afternoon sun has begun its slow descent now. Its fierce brightness softens almost imperceptibly, though the heat still surrounds you. You turn back toward the green valley. The sight feels welcoming, almost comforting. The desert has taught an important lesson without speaking a single word. It was never simply empty land. It was a powerful neighbor that shaped Egyptian life every single day, encouraging preparation, humility, patience, and deep appreciation for the life-giving river waiting below. As you begin your descent toward the villages once more, you notice voices drifting faintly across the fields. The marketplace is beginning to stir again, preparing for the cooler hours when trade and conversation will once more fill the shaded streets. The path carries you gently down from the rocky edge of the desert until the familiar green of the Nile Valley welcomes you once again. The afternoon has begun to soften. The heat remains powerful, yet its sharpest edge has faded almost unnoticed. The village is waking again, not from sleep, from shelter. Doors that remained mostly quiet during the hottest hours now stand open. People emerge carrying baskets, folded linen, clay jars, and bundles of fresh produce. The streets gradually fill with quiet conversation as life flows back into the open air. It feels like a second morning, only slower. Ahead lies the marketplace. Even before you arrive, your senses tell you that you're close. You hear gentle bargaining, the shuffle of sandals, the occasional bray of an impatient donkey. Somewhere nearby a child laughs, followed immediately by several adults trying unsuccessfully not to laugh as well. The atmosphere is cheerful, never frantic. The first thing you notice is the shade. Almost every stall has been arranged beneath some form of protection. Woven reed mats stretch between wooden poles. Palm branches create natural roofs. Nearby buildings cast long shadows that slowly creep across the marketplace as the sun begins its descent. The market has learned from the sun, not fought it. Historians generally agree that ancient Egyptian settlements often incorporated shaded public spaces wherever practical, whether through carefully positioned buildings, temporary coverings, or clusters of trees. Reducing direct sunlight made daily commerce far more comfortable. Good business appreciates cool air. You wander between rows of merchants displaying goods that represent months of patient work. Fresh onions, bundles of garlic, figs, dates, lentils, beautiful woven baskets, smooth pottery, neatly folded linen. Everything's arranged with remarkable care. A merchant carefully brushes dust from the surface of a polished clay bowl before placing it back on display. Beside him, another seller pours cool water over several bunches of leafy vegetables, helping them remain fresh a little longer beneath the warm afternoon air. Nothing dramatic, just practical knowledge. You stop beside a woman selling fragrant herbs gathered from nearby gardens. Their scent immediately fills the air around you. Mint, coriander, fresh green leaves crushed gently between careful fingers. The fragrance cuts through the lingering warmth with surprising freshness. She smiles quietly before wrapping a small bundle inside woven reeds for another customer. Nearby, two elderly men examine a length of fine linen. Rather than rushing their decision, they hold the fabric toward the light, feeling its texture between experienced fingertips. Quality reveals itself slowly. The conversation continues politely. Nobody seems offended by careful negotiation. Bargaining forms part of ordinary life. Across the lane, several potters have arranged rows of water jars whose rounded surfaces catch the golden afternoon light. Some are plain and practical. Others carry delicate painted designs of birds, fish, lotus flowers, or graceful reeds. Art appears everywhere, even on everyday objects. A young apprentice accidentally bumps one display with his shoulder. For one nervous second, everything wobbles, then settles. Several nearby merchants smile with obvious relief. The apprentice blushes. Life continues. The marketplace forgives small mistakes. You notice how frequently people pause beneath the deepest patches of shade before continuing their shopping. Conversations naturally gather wherever the air feels a little cooler. The architecture guides social life, without anyone planning it. Several sycamore trees stand near the center of the market. their broad canopies sheltering both customers and merchants. Beneath one tree sits an elderly storyteller surrounded by curious children. His voice rises gently, never loudly. The children listen with wide eyes while occasionally glancing toward their parents, who continue browsing nearby stalls. Stories travel easily through markets, so do news and rumors. A fisherman proudly displays today's catch upon damp woven mats. Small fish glisten softly while larger specimens rest beneath wet cloths to protect them from the lingering warmth. Freshness matters. Everyone can see it. One customer gently presses a fish with practiced fingers before nodding in approval. Trust grows through observation. Nearby, a baker arranges warm loaves across flat wooden boards. Their crusts release the comforting aroma you first noticed this morning. Fresh bread still attracts everyone. Some things never change. You accept a small piece offered by the baker. The crust cracks softly. The inside remains wonderfully tender. Warm bread tastes especially satisfying after walking beneath the afternoon sun. Historians continue debating exactly how prices were negotiated within ordinary village markets, because formal price lists rarely survived. Much commerce likely relied upon barter, customary values, and mutual understanding rather than fixed numerical prices familiar today. Relationships carried value too. Trade depended upon trust. One particularly curious idea suggested by some researchers proposes that certain market areas may have been deliberately designed to capture prevailing afternoon breezes. Definitive proof remains difficult to establish. Yet experienced builders almost certainly recognize which streets remained cooler throughout the day. The wind quietly influenced commerce. You find yourself standing beside a craftsman carving tiny wooden figures. His knife moves slowly across smooth sycamore wood, releasing a pleasant scent with every careful cut. Thin curls of fresh wood fall silently into his lap. Nothing is hurried. The rhythm itself feels calming. Across from him, a jeweler displays simple beads made from colourful stones, shells, and glazed materials. Sunlight catches their polished surfaces, producing tiny flashes of blue, green, and deep red. Even modest jewellery brightens the marketplace. Children stare with fascination. Parents smile knowingly. Not every treasure can be purchased today. As you continue wandering, the temperature becomes noticeably kinder. Long shadows stretch across the ground, cooling paths that felt almost untouchable only hours earlier. People sense the change. More customers arrive. More conversations begin. The market slowly grows livelier. Without realizing it, everyone has waited for the sun to relax its grip before returning to the center of village life. The marketplace is not merely a place to buy things. It is where friendships continue. News spreads. Marriages are discussed. Travelers share distant stories. Children discover the wider world beyond their own homes. Commerce and community become inseparable. You pause beneath the largest sycamore tree and look back across the bustling square. Golden light filters gently through leaves, softening every face and every basket. The village seems perfectly balanced once again. The desert still surrounds this remarkable civilization. The heat has not disappeared, yet through thoughtful timing, clever design, patient habits, and generations of shared wisdom, ordinary people have transformed another difficult afternoon into a peaceful gathering filled with conversation, laughter, and quiet purpose. Beyond the marketplace, enormous temple walls now glow warmly beneath the descending sun, inviting you toward another sanctuary where stone itself learned how to keep the desert at bay. You leave the cheerful sounds of the marketplace behind as the afternoon begins its gentle slide toward evening. The sun still shines brightly, yet its fierce intensity has softened into a warm golden glow that stretches long shadows across the village. Ahead, enormous stone walls rise above the palm trees. The temple waits quietly. Unlike the bustling marketplace, no loud voices drift from beyond its entrance. The atmosphere changes long before you reach the gateway. Conversations naturally become softer. Footsteps slow almost without thinking. The place encourages calm. You pass beneath towering stone columns whose surfaces are covered with finely carved scenes. Kings offer gifts to the gods. Priests perform sacred rituals. Birds, flowers, and river plants seem to bloom from the stone itself. The carvings feel alive. Thousands of tiny details catch the afternoon light. Yet the greatest surprise comes only after you step inside. Cool air, not cold, simply calm. After hours beneath the Egyptian sun, the difference feels remarkable. Thick limestone walls have quietly absorbed the day's heat while allowing the interior to remain far more comfortable than the open courtyards outside. The stone performs its own silent magic. You pause to let your eyes adjust. Bright sunlight fades behind you, replaced by gentle shadows stretching across polished floors. These sounds of the village become distant echoes. Even your own footsteps seem quieter here. The silence is soothing. It almost asks you to breathe more slowly. Historians generally agree that Egyptian temples were designed not only as places of worship, but also as carefully engineered structures responding to the local climate. Massive walls, limited direct sunlight, deep halls, and shaded courtyards all helped create cooler interiors throughout much of the day. Architecture served comfort, as well as devotion. You gently place your hand against one of the enormous columns. The stone feels surprisingly cool. It has spent centuries doing exactly the same thing, absorbing warmth slowly while protecting those within. Nearby, a priest walks quietly through the hall carrying a small vessel filled with fragrant incense. Thin streams of sweet smoke rise lazily toward the ceiling before dissolving into the dim light above. The scent is gentle. Resin, wood, a touch of flowers. It mixes pleasantly with a faint smell of cool stone and clean air. The temple feels completely different from the marketplace. Outside, movement fills every corner. Inside, stillness becomes the dominant sound. You continue deeper into the complex where sunlight enters only through carefully positioned openings high above. Narrow beams of golden light fall across the floor like quiet pathways. Dust floats through them. Tiny particles shimmer for a moment, then disappear again into shadow. The effect is almost dreamlike. Several visitors sit quietly along one wall, escaping both the afternoon warmth and the busy activity beyond the gates. No one appears to object. The temple offers spiritual comfort, but it also provides physical relief from the relentless climate outside. Sometimes the two become inseparable. A young apprentice carefully sweeps the stone floor using a bundle of reeds. His movements are slow and deliberate, raising almost no dust. Even cleaning feels peaceful here. You notice shallow pools of water within certain courtyards. Their surfaces reflect columns and blue sky while adding a subtle freshness to the surrounding air, whether intended primarily for ritual purposes or practical use. The presence of water changes the atmosphere immediately. The space feels softer, more welcoming. Some researchers suggest that pools, gardens, and shaded courtyards may have contributed modest cooling effects inside larger temple complexes. Measuring exactly how much comfort they provided remains difficult after thousands of years. But anyone standing beside still water on a warm afternoon understands the appeal. Nature quietly assists architecture. Birds seem to appreciate it too. Several swallows dart gracefully beneath the temple roof before disappearing through openings near the entrance. Their cheerful calls briefly interrupt the silence before fading once again. Life enters even sacred places. You walk into an open courtyard surrounded by high walls. Here the sunlight returns, yet the stone beneath your feet remains cooler than the exposed ground outside the temple. The walls cast generous shadows. Their height matters. Instead of allowing sunlight to flood every corner all day, they create moving bands of shade that slowly shift as the sun crosses the sky. Every hour changes the pattern. The builders understood this. Nearby, gardeners carefully tend lotus flowers growing in a small pool surrounded by papyrus plants. Their green leaves provide another welcome contrast against pale stone. The air smells wonderfully fresh. Water, flowers, warm limestone. The combination is surprisingly calming. Historians continue debating how ordinary villagers experienced temples compared with priests and officials who spent much of their working lives inside these remarkable structures. Some areas remained restricted, while others welcomed visitors during festivals or daily worship. The exact boundaries changed over time. Ancient Egypt lasted for thousands of years. Its customs evolved along the way. One intriguing tradition appears in temple reliefs showing attendants using large feather fans near important ceremonies. While these fans certainly symbolize prestige, they almost certainly provided genuine relief during warmer days as well. Even sacred rituals appreciated a breeze. You pause beneath another towering column whose painted colors still cling faintly to sheltered surfaces. Red, blue, green, golden yellow. Many people imagine ancient temples as plain grey stone, yet they were once alive with brilliant colour that reflected beautifully in the Egyptian sunlight. The past was more colourful than many expect. As the afternoon continues fading toward evening, beams of sunlight shift gradually across the floor, illuminating carvings that remained hidden only moments earlier. The temple seems to change with the hour. Nothing moves, yet everything changes. You hear quiet chanting from a distant chamber. The words blend softly with the fluttering wings of pigeons resting high above the entrance. The entire building seems to breathe, slowly, patiently. After spending so much of the day learning how ordinary homes, fields, workshops, and marketplaces adapted to the desert, you begin to appreciate that temples followed the same wisdom. Respect the climate. Use shade wisely. Welcome moving air. Build with patience. Stone remembers what generations discover. As you step back toward the entrance, warm sunlight greets you once again. The evening's drawing closer now. Families will soon gather. Rooftops will begin filling with conversation, and children will return to play beneath a gentler sky. The hottest hours are finally surrendering. A different kind of life is about to begin. As you step out from the cool embrace of the temple, the afternoon has mellowed into a softer golden light. The air remains warm, but the fierce edge that ruled the middle of the day has finally begun to fade. The village seems to notice immediately. Doors open wider, voices become livelier, laughter returns to the streets. Children appear almost as if someone quietly invited them all outside at the same moment. They spill into shaded lanes between mud brick houses, racing across patches of cooling earth with an energy that seems impossible after such a hot day. You cannot help smiling. Childhood appears remarkably similar across thousands of years. A little boy carefully rolls a wooden hoop along the path using a smooth stick. Two friends chase behind him, cheering every successful turn. Nearby, several girls toss small cloth balls back and forth while laughing whenever someone makes an awkward catch. Simple games, boundless joy. Historians generally agree that Egyptian children enjoyed a surprising variety of toys. Archaeologists have uncovered wooden animals, carved dolls, miniature boats, spinning tops, balls made from leather or woven fibers, and board games carefully crafted from wood and stone. Play was never considered a waste of time. It was part of growing up. A gentle breeze moves through the lane, lifting fine dust only briefly before it settles again. The scent of fresh bread still lingers from nearby homes, now joined by the sweet fragrance of ripe figs drying on woven mats. The evening smells comforting. You continue walking until you reach a shaded courtyard where several older children are helping their parents prepare tomorrow's work. One carefully stacks bundles of flax. Another counts clay storage jars while an older sister checks woven baskets for damage. Work begins early. So does responsibility. No one seems unhappy about helping. The tasks fit naturally into the rhythm of family life. Children learn by participating. Rather than listening to long explanations, they simply watch adults perform familiar routines every day. Gradually, those routines become their own. Knowledge passes quietly. You remember the young apprentice at the stone quarry and the children grinding grain earlier in the day. Everywhere you've walked, learning has happened through observation. Schools exist in some settings, particularly for future scribes and officials, but most practical education unfolds within ordinary households and workplaces. The village itself becomes the classroom. Ahead, several boys kneel beside a shallow irrigation canal, carefully launching tiny reed boats into the slow-moving water. They cheer softly as the miniature vessels drift around gentle bends before one becomes caught among reeds. A quick rescue follows. The adventure continues. Watching them, it's easy to imagine how future sailors first discover their fascination with boats through games exactly like this. Imagination often begins with play. Nearby, an elderly grandfather sits beneath a sycamore tree repairing a fishing net. Two curious grandchildren watch every movement. Occasionally one asks a question. The old man answers patiently without ever stopping his hands. The lesson feels effortless. You notice how comfortable everyone has become outdoors again now that the harshest sunlight has eased. The narrow streets, carefully planned to create shade during much of the afternoon, now feel pleasantly cool beneath your sandals. Mud brick walls slowly release the warmth they absorbed earlier. The air softens. The village seems to breathe again. A young mother pours cool water from a clay jar into several small cups waiting on a low wooden table. The outside of the jar remains slightly damp from evaporation. Each child receives a drink. No one gulps. The careful habits you have observed all day continue naturally. Drink steadily. Avoid waste. Respect the water. Those lessons begin early in life. Across the lane, several girls gather flowers growing beside a courtyard wall. They weave the blossoms into simple garlands while exchanging quiet stories that make everyone giggle. The flowers smell wonderfully fresh. Their delicate fragrance drifts gently through the warm evening air. Historians still debate exactly how much free time ordinary Egyptian children enjoyed compared with their daily responsibilities. Wealth, occupation, location. An historical period almost certainly influenced childhood in many different ways. No single experience represented everyone. Ancient Egypt was never one uniform society. One charming tradition occasionally suggested by researchers involves children making tiny animals from leftover clay while watching family members work in pottery workshops. Many small clay figures discovered by archaeologists may indeed have been toys rather than religious objects. Although certainty remains elusive, perhaps they were both. Children often find joy wherever adults leave ordinary materials behind. A flock of white birds suddenly rises from nearby fields, circling gracefully above the village before settling again among the reeds. Every child looks upward. For a few peaceful moments, everyone simply watches. Nature provides its own entertainment. The breeze grows slightly cooler. You barely notice the change at first, but the village certainly does. Adults begin placing woven mats onto flat rooftops. Others sweep courtyards clean before the evening meal. Preparations quietly begin. Night is approaching. A group of boys practice throwing small reed spears at a bundle of straw standing several yards away. Their aim is enthusiastic rather than accurate. One spear lands far from the target. Everyone laughs, even the thrower. Learning patience seems to accompany every skill. Nearby, a little girl carefully copies decorative patterns into damp sand using a smooth stick. Her older sister gently corrects a line before adding another graceful curve beside it. Art begins simply. As you watch these ordinary moments unfold, you realize something that grand monuments rarely reveal. Civilizations are raised by children, not only kings. Every future farmer, builder, priest, merchant, physician, and scribe first learned to walk through streets very much like these. Every expert once asked endless questions. Every master once made clumsy mistakes. The evening light grows warmer still, painting mud brick walls in shades of amber and gold. Long shadows stretch across the village while birds settle noisily into nearby trees. The day's hardest hours have passed. Children gradually disappear toward their homes, carrying toys, baskets, or small bundles of herbs gathered for supper. Their laughter fades into quiet conversations waiting behind familiar doorways. Soon families will climb onto rooftops, neighbors will exchange stories beneath cooling skies, and the desert that blazed so fiercely only hours ago will finally begin surrendering its heat to the coming night. the final glow of the afternoon slowly melts into evening, and with it the entire village seems to transform once again. The fierce sun that ruled every decision only a few hours ago now hangs low above the western horizon, bathing the Nile Valley in gentle shades of amber and copper. The air finally feels different, cooler, softer, easier to breathe. You notice people smiling a little more freely as they step outdoors. The cautious rhythm of the afternoon gives way to something lighter. Doors remain open, conversations grow longer. No one seems eager to hurry inside. After all, this is the reward they have patiently awaited throughout the day. Evening belongs to everyone. A pleasant breeze drifts across the river and winds gently through the village lanes. It carries the fresh scent of damp reeds mixed with the sweetness of flowering plants and the faint aroma of evening meals being prepared. The breeze touches your face. It feels wonderful. You had almost forgotten how refreshing moving air could be after enduring the stillness of midday. Families begin climbing narrow stairways leading onto their flat rooftops. Some carry woven mats rolled beneath one arm. Others balance baskets filled with bread, fruit, and clay cups for the evening meal. The rooftops come alive from below. You can hear footsteps overhead as neighbours greet one another across narrow streets. Laughter travels easily between houses. Somewhere nearby, someone begins humming a familiar tune. The village has gained another floor. Historians generally agree that flat rooftops served many practical purposes throughout ancient Egypt. During cooler hours they became places for conversation, simple household work, drying food, and sometimes even sleeping during especially warm seasons. The roof becomes another room, perhaps the most pleasant one. You climb a short staircase yourself until you reach the top of a modest mud brick home. From here the entire village stretches before you. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires. Palm trees sway softly. Beyond everything, the Nile reflects the colours of the setting sun like polished bronze. The view is peaceful. Several neighbours sit nearby sharing their evening meal. Fresh bread rests inside a woven basket beside bowls of beans, onions, cucumbers, and sweet dates. The food is simple. The company is rich. No one eats quickly. The day no longer demands urgent labour. Instead, conversation flows naturally between quiet bites of bread and occasional drinks of cool water from clay vessels. You recognise those familiar jars immediately. They have served faithfully all day. A little girl points excitedly toward the sky where several birds fly home in graceful formation. Her grandfather quietly names each species while she listens with complete attention. Learning never truly ends. It merely changes pace. The breeze grows stronger for a few moments, gently lifting loose strands of linen and cooling sun-warmed rooftops. Everyone pauses. Nobody speaks. The silence itself becomes enjoyable. It reminds you how carefully this entire civilization has learned to treasure comfort without expecting luxury. Simple pleasures matter most. Across the narrow street, an elderly woman sits spinning flax beneath the fading light. Her hands continue moving almost automatically after decades of practice. The spindle turns. Thread grows longer. Evening work feels almost meditative. Nearby, another family repairs fishing nets that will be needed before sunrise tomorrow. There is no pressure. The task simply fits naturally into the peaceful rhythm of dusk. Preparation replaces urgency. The day's hardest work is finished. Children gather around one of the older storytellers in the neighbourhood. They settle onto woven mats while adults continue listening from nearby rooftops. His voice is gentle, steady, comforting. He speaks of brave travellers, wise animals, generous rivers, and clever farmers who learn to read the moods of nature. Perhaps some stories are true. Perhaps others have grown larger with each generation. No one seems particularly concerned about separating every fact from every legend. The stories serve another purpose. They bring people together. Historians continue debating exactly how much of ancient Egyptian oral tradition disappeared before it could ever be written down. Countless tales were probably shared beneath evening skies like this for centuries before fading quietly into history. Not every treasure survives. Some exist only in memory. One particularly charming tradition described in later periods suggests that neighbours occasionally gathered on rooftops simply to enjoy the cooler night air while exchanging local news. Whether this happened in every village remains uncertain, but standing here now, it feels entirely believable. The rooftops invite conversation. Why waste them? The western sky slowly deepens from gold into shades of orange, violet, and soft blue. The first stars begin appearing one by one above the desert horizon. Children notice them first. Adults soon follow. The transformation happens so gradually that you almost miss it. Heat leaves the stone. Coolness settles over the village. The entire landscape seems to sigh with relief. A musician somewhere below begins playing a simple melody on a reed flute. The notes drift gently through the evening air, rising and falling with the breeze. The sound feels perfectly suited to this hour. Not loud, not dramatic, just peaceful. The melody blends with distant frogs calling from irrigation canals and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the river's surface. Nature joins the performance. You lean comfortably against the low rooftop wall. Beneath your hands, the mud brick still holds a little warmth collected throughout the day, though it cools steadily as darkness approaches. The changing temperature reminds you once again how carefully Egyptian life followed the rhythms of the environment. Nothing happened by accident. Every routine belonged to the climate. Nearby, several families spread woven sleeping mats across their rooftops. Some may sleep here later if the night remains comfortably warm. Others simply enjoy resting beneath the stars before returning indoors. The sky grows darker. The stars multiply. The Milky Way gradually stretches overhead with astonishing clarity, untouched by any modern lights. You find yourself wondering how many generations have looked upward from these same rooftops. Farmers, builders, children, grandparents, priests, merchants, all watching the same familiar stars after surviving another day beneath the desert sun. Tomorrow morning they will wake before dawn once again, beginning the familiar cycle that has shaped life along the Nile for thousands of years. But for now, there is only cool air, quiet conversation, gentle music, and the comforting feeling that the harshest heat has finally surrendered to the peace of evening. The stars now shine brightly above the Nile Valley. But your journey does not end with sunset, even in the cool comfort of evening. People continue thinking about tomorrow's heat. The desert never truly leaves their minds, it merely rests. As you climb down from the rooftop and wander through the softly lit village, you notice several homes where small clay lamps flicker near open doorways. Their warm light spills gently onto the streets, illuminating quiet conversations and the final household tasks before sleep. The pace is wonderfully slow. No one seems in a hurry. You follow the pleasant scent of crushed herbs toward a modest home where an elderly healer welcomes several neighbours. The room is simple, with mud brick walls, woven mats, shelves of clay jars, and bundles of dried plants hanging from wooden beams overhead. The air smells remarkable. Mint, chamomile, frankincense, freshly crushed leaves. A touch of honey is both earthy and sweet, creating a comforting atmosphere before a single remedy is prepared. Historians generally agree that Egyptian medicine ranked among the most advanced in the ancient world. Surviving medical papier describe treatments for injuries, digestive troubles, eye diseases, fevers, and many everyday illnesses, blending careful observation with religious beliefs. Practical knowledge mattered greatly, so did faith. The elderly healer gently lifts a clay jar from a shelf and removes its woven lid. Inside are dried herbs collected during previous seasons. She crushes several leaves using a smooth stone mortar. Tap, turn, press. The rhythmic sound fills the quiet room. Soon a pleasant fragrance rises into the air. The mixture is combined with cool water drawn earlier from one of the familiar clay jars you've encountered throughout the day. Nothing here feels mysterious. It feels methodical. People living in such intense heat understood dehydration long before the word itself existed. They recognized exhaustion, dizziness, weakness, and headaches as dangers requiring rest, shade, and careful drinking. Experience became the teacher. One young farmer enters the room after spending much of the afternoon repairing irrigation channels beneath the sun. His face appears flushed, and his shoulders sag with fatigue. The healer does not panic. She invites him to sit quietly in the coolest corner of the room. A damp linen cloth is gently placed across his forehead. Another rests around his neck. He slowly drinks from a small clay cup. The treatment seems wonderfully sensible. Coolness first, patience second, activity later. The room remains almost silent while everyone allows the man's body to recover naturally. Sometimes the best medicine is simply removing yourself from the heat. Ancient Egyptians appear to have understood this instinctively. Nearby, another visitor asks about sore muscles after carrying heavy baskets throughout harvest season. The healer prepares scented oil mixed with crushed herbs before carefully rubbing it into tired shoulders. The fragrance fills the room. Warm resin, fresh plants, a hint of flowers. The massage itself seems nearly as valuable as the ingredients. Gentle hands can calm both body and mind. Several shelves display neatly arranged clay containers holding dried garlic, onions, seeds, honey, oils, and powdered minerals. Each has its place. Organization matters. Mistakes could prove costly. Honey deserves special attention. Modern science confirms what ancient Egyptians discovered through observation. Honey naturally resists the growth of many harmful microbes, making it surprisingly useful for treating wounds and protecting damaged skin. They did not know the chemistry. They certainly appreciated the results. A mother arrives carrying a small child whose skin has become irritated after playing outdoors beneath the afternoon sun. The healer gently applies soothing oil before recommending extra time in the shade during tomorrow's hottest hours. Simple advice. Timeless wisdom. You notice that nearly every recommendation returns to the same principles you've encountered throughout your journey. Water, shade, rest, loose clothing, patience. The remedies support these habits rather than replacing them. Historians still debate how much ancient Egyptian medicine relied upon careful experimentation compared with a religious tradition. Medical texts often combine practical treatments with prayers or symbolic rituals, making it difficult to separate physical observation from spiritual belief. Perhaps the two were never entirely separate. For the people living here, healing involved both body and spirit. One particularly fascinating tradition appears in several ancient texts describing cooling ointments prepared from plant oils mixed with fragrant ingredients. Researchers continue discussing exactly which combinations proved most effective because many ancient plant names remain difficult to identify with complete certainty. The recipes whisper across history. Not every ingredient still reveals its identity. Outside, the village has grown even quieter. The night breeze slips gently through open doorways, carrying away the lingering warmth trapped inside homes throughout the day. People welcome it gratefully. Several families have placed water jars near entrances where moving air encourages gentle evaporation, helping the vessels remain pleasantly cool until morning. The technique requires no complicated tools, only patience. A cat strolls confidently through the doorway before curling into a comfortable sleeping position beside one of the clay jars. It has chosen the coolest place. Once again, the animals seem to understand comfort as well as any human. Across the room, an elderly man quietly explains to several younger villagers how to recognize the earliest signs of exhaustion during harvest. Dry mouth, heavy limbs, confused thoughts, slow movements. Although he uses different words than modern medicine, his observations sound remarkably familiar. Generations have watched these symptoms carefully. Experience sharpens understanding. You realize that the true strength of Egyptian medicine lies not only in herbs or oils, but in careful observation. Living beside the desert demanded close attention to the human body. Ignore warning signs. The sun grows stronger. Notice them early. Recovery becomes much easier. The village itself reinforces these lessons every day through architecture, clothing, schedules, and shared customs. Medicine begins long before illness appears. As the healer carefully returns each clay jar to its proper shelf, the final lamp inside the room burns steadily beside her. Its soft glow reflects from polished pottery. Outside, crickets sing quietly beneath a sky crowded with stars. The desert, so fierce only hours ago, now rests peacefully beyond the dark fields. Tomorrow it will awaken again. The people of the Nile already know exactly how they will greet it, not with fear, with preparation, with wisdom patiently gathered across countless generations living beneath one of the world's brightest suns. The village sleeps peacefully beneath a sky crowded with brilliant stars, but your journey quietly shifts once more. Tonight, instead of following farmers, craftsmen, or merchants, you find yourself imagining another part of ancient Egyptian society, the homes of the powerful, the residences of kings. It is tempting to believe that a pharaoh lived beyond the reach of the desert sun, comfortably hidden inside endless luxury while ordinary people endured the climate outside. The truth is rather more interesting. Even the greatest ruler could not command the weather. The same sun that warmed a humble mud brick cottage also blazed above royal palaces. The same hot winds swept across villages, temples, and gardens alike. Wealth changed many things. It did not change the climate. As dawn approaches once more, you imagine entering a royal palace just before sunrise. Servants are already awake. Courtyards are being swept. Pools reflect the pale colours of the early sky. And gardeners quietly water flowers before the heat begins to build. The timing feels familiar. You have seen it all before. Only the surroundings have changed. Historians generally agree that Egyptian palaces differed greatly from the massive stone temples that survive today. Many royal residences were built largely from mud brick, timber, plaster, and painted decoration. These materials rarely survived thousands of years, leaving archaeologists with only fragments of what were once magnificent homes. Stone remembers. Mud often returns to the earth. You step into a broad palace courtyard surrounded by graceful columns supporting shaded walkways. Brightly painted walls display scenes of birds flying through marshes, blooming lotus flowers, and peaceful river life. The colours are astonishing. Deep blue, rich red, golden yellow, fresh green. The paintings seem to bring the coolness of the Nile indoors. Nearby, a long reflecting pool stretches through the centre of the courtyard. Its calm surface mirrors the first rays of sunrise while water lilies float gently upon it. The air feels cooler here. Not dramatically, just enough. Water changes everything. The gentle sound of splashing accompanies the songs of waking birds perched among carefully tended trees. The palace smells different from the village. Fresh flowers, wet stone, cedar wood imported from distant lands, fragrant oils. Everything feels carefully arranged to create comfort without unnecessary excess. You notice servants opening shutters and woven screens to encourage the morning breeze before the day's heat arrives. They move quietly through the palace, understanding that cool dawn air is too valuable to waste. Nature remains the greatest servant. Even kings depend upon it. Several attendants carry large clay jars filled with fresh water from storage rooms kept in shaded parts of the palace. Their rounded surfaces glisten slightly with moisture from slow evaporation. You smile. The familiar jars have followed you everywhere. Royal households may own finer versions decorated with painted designs, but the basic principle remains exactly the same. Simple clay still performs its quiet miracle. A palace official walks through a shaded hallway wearing beautifully woven linen so fine that it almost seems to glow in the morning light. His clothing is elegant. It is also practical. Even luxury respects the desert. Loose garments allow air to circulate freely while bright colours reflect much of the sun's warmth. Fashion and survival continue working together, regardless of social rank. Outside, gardeners trim flowering shrubs surrounding pools where ducks glide peacefully through still water. Trees create generous shade. Palm branches sway gently. The palace feels like an oasis within an oasis. Historians believe royal gardens served many purposes beyond beauty. They demonstrated wealth, supplied fruit and flowers, supported religious ceremonies, and created cooler outdoor spaces where members of the court could work or relax during favourable hours. A garden becomes another form of architecture, one built with living walls. You stroll beneath a vine-covered walkway where clusters of grapes hang overhead, casting delicate patterns of shade across the path below. Every few steps the temperature seems slightly different. Plants quietly shape the air around them. Nearby, servants sprinkle water across sections of the courtyard floor before an important gathering. The thin layer quickly begins evaporating beneath the warming sun. Some scholars suggest this practice may have produced a brief cooling effect in certain palace spaces. Although historians continue discussing how frequently it occurred, and whether comfort or cleanliness served as the primary goal, perhaps both mattered equally. One curious tradition preserved in artistic scenes shows attendants standing beside royalty with enormous feather fans mounted upon long handles. The fans certainly symbolize status. They also moved air, watching them sway rhythmically. You realize that even the highest officials appreciated a refreshing breeze after walking through the Egyptian heat. Comfort remains wonderfully democratic. The sun shines on everyone. As morning progresses, palace routines begin resembling those you observed in the village. Officials conduct business early. Messengers arrive before temperatures climb too high. Craftsmen complete outdoor work while the air remains manageable. Royal schedules follow the climate, just like everyone else's. The difference lies mostly in surroundings rather than strategy. You pass through a quiet audience hall where enormous columns support a painted ceiling decorated with stars. Although sunlight glows brilliantly outside, the hall itself remains pleasantly dim. Cool stone beneath your sandals, soft echoes, a faint scent of incense lingering from an earlier ceremony. The building encourages calm thought. Perhaps that was intentional. A palace physician walks nearby carrying a polished wooden box containing herbs, oils, bandages, and carefully prepared remedies. Even the royal family experienced headaches, exhaustion, sunburn, and the ordinary discomforts of hot weather. No crown blocks sunlight. The body remains human. Historians still debate exactly how luxurious everyday palace life truly was compared with the idealized scenes carved into monuments. Official artwork naturally emphasized order, prosperity, and royal perfection. While ordinary inconveniences rarely appeared, reality was probably more complicated. It usually is. As the morning slowly grows warmer once again, you find yourself thinking back to the farmer adjusting an irrigation channel, the potter shaping cool clay, the merchant arranging shaded stalls, and the children launching tiny reed boats into the canal. Their lives differed greatly from those inside the palace, yet they all shared one remarkable companion, the desert sun. Whether surrounded by painted columns or humble mud brick walls, every Egyptian greeted each day with the same quiet understanding: wake early, value shade, protect water, respect the heat. The wisdom belonged to everyone. Soon your path will leave royal comfort behind and return to the wider landscape, where nature itself occasionally reminded both kings and villagers that the desert could become even more unpredictable than anyone expected. The morning unfolds peacefully once again, and for a little while it seems as though ancient Egypt will follow its familiar rhythm forever. Farmers walk toward the fields before sunrise. Fishing boats drift quietly onto the Nile. Bakers shape fresh dough while children carry water from cool clay jars. Everything feels predictable, comfortingly so. Yet the people living here know better than to trust every calm morning. The desert is patient. It occasionally reminds everyone who truly governs this landscape. You leave the village shortly after sunrise and follow a narrow path toward open farmland. The air is fresh enough to make the walk pleasant. A few scattered clouds drift lazily across the pale blue sky. An uncommon but welcome sight above the Nile Valley. Birds sing from the reeds. Oxen begin another day in the fields. The breeze carries the familiar scent of damp earth and growing grain. Nothing hints at trouble, at least not yet. Historians generally agree that Egypt enjoyed a remarkably stable climate compared with many neighbouring regions. Even so, stability never meant perfect predictability. Strong desert winds, unusually hot periods, dust storms, and occasional disruptions challenged communities throughout the long history of the Nile Valley. Nature always reserved the right to surprise people. You notice several experienced farmers glancing toward the western horizon more often than usual. Their expressions remain calm, yet observant. Years of experience have taught them to pay attention. Not every warning arrives dramatically. Far away, the edge of the desert appears slightly hazy. The difference is subtle, easy to overlook. One elderly farmer quietly pauses beside you and points toward the distant hills. Watch the horizon. He needs no further explanation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a faint veil of dust begins rising into the morning sky. The wind has changed. It arrives gently at first. Warm, dry, persistent. Loose leaves flutter across the irrigation paths. Palm fronds sway with slightly greater energy. The birds that had filled the morning with cheerful songs become noticeably quieter. Even the animals seem to notice. A group of goats naturally drifts closer to nearby buildings. Donkeys lower their heads against the strengthening breeze. No one panics. Preparation begins instead. Villagers calmly secure woven mats covering storage jars. Laundry hanging between rooftops is gathered before stronger gusts can carry it away. Market merchants tie down lightweight baskets using simple ropes. Small actions, performed quickly, performed together. You help one family roll a large reed screen across an open courtyard entrance. Fine dust has already begun finding its way through every small opening. The air smells different now, less like fresh earth, more like dry stone heated beneath endless sunlight. The wind whistles softly through narrow streets, carrying tiny grains of sand that gently tap against mud brick walls. The sound is surprisingly delicate, almost musical. For now, historians believe that Egyptians living close to the desert became highly skilled at recognizing changing weather conditions, while they lacked modern forecasting tools. Daily observation allowed experienced farmers, traders, and travelers to notice subtle changes in wind, clouds, light, and animal behavior. Nature offered many clues. Those willing to watch carefully benefited greatly. Within another hour, the wind grows noticeably stronger. Dust lifts from open ground, turning distant palm trees into blurred silhouettes. Sunlight loses its brilliant clarity, becoming filtered through countless tiny particles floating in the air. The sky changes color, golden, then pale brown. The village feels strangely quieter. People move indoors. Children who played outside only moments ago now watch from shaded doorways with curious eyes. Inside, one home. An elderly grandmother calmly places damp cloths across window openings to reduce drifting dust. The moisture catches fine particles surprisingly well, while allowing a little fresh air to continue entering. Another simple solution, born from long experience. Outside, the stronger gusts produce a constant whispering sound as sand brushes across walls, rooftops, and pathways. It never becomes frightening, just relentless. You notice something remarkable. The thick mud brick homes that stayed cool during the heat now perform another valuable service. Their sturdy walls protect families from blowing dust just as effectively as they shield them from sunlight. Good design solves more than one problem. A young merchant laughs quietly while brushing sand from a basket that somehow collected dust despite being covered carefully. The desert always wins a little. His expression suggests this is simply another ordinary inconvenience, not a disaster. The attitude feels refreshing, rather than fighting nature with frustration. People adapt with quiet patience. Eventually the strongest gusts begin easing. The air remains dusty, but visibility slowly improves. Palm trees emerge once more from the hazy distance. Birdsong cautiously returns. Life resumes, almost immediately. Several villagers step outdoors carrying simple brooms made from bundled reeds. Dust is swept from doorways, courtyards, and workshops with practiced efficiency. The cleanup seems routine. Perhaps it is. Some scholars continue debating how frequently major sandstorms affected different parts of ancient Egypt. Geological evidence, written records, and archaeological deposits offer valuable clues. But local conditions almost certainly varied across centuries and regions. Not every village experienced the same challenges. The Nile Valley is long. Its stories are equally varied. One particularly intriguing tradition suggests that experienced caravan leaders sometimes paused long journeys after certain wind events, because shifting sands could temporarily erase familiar paths through the desert. Historians still discuss how widespread this practice became. Yet the idea reflects a practical understanding of changing landscapes. Even roads can disappear. Patience finds them again. As the dust continues settling, the village gradually regains its familiar appearance. Children cautiously return outdoors. Merchants reopen shaded stalls. Farmers inspect fields to ensure young crops escaped serious damage. Fortunately, today's wind has been more nuisance than catastrophe. Everyone seems grateful. You stand beside an irrigation canal where calm water reflects the returning blue sky. Fine grains of sand float briefly across the surface before sinking slowly to the bottom. The breeze feels cooler now, gentler. The storm has spent its energy. Watching the village recover so naturally, you realize that resilience here is rarely dramatic. It exists in countless small habits repeated across generations. Secure the roof, cover the water, protect the grain, wait patiently, begin again. Those simple actions have allowed communities to thrive beside one of the world's harshest deserts for thousands of years. Soon your journey will move beyond weather and daily routines towards something even deeper, exploring how the powerful Egyptian sun itself shaped faith, imagination, and the way people understood the divine. The morning after the dusty winds feels wonderfully clear. Overnight, the air has settled, leaving the Nile Valley washed in soft golden light. Every palm tree appears sharper against the horizon. Every bird call carries a little farther through the cool dawn. The village seems refreshed. So do you. As you walk toward the river once more, you notice people greeting the sunrise with quiet familiarity. No one treats this daily event as ordinary, even though it has happened every morning for countless generations. The rising sun is more than light. It is reassurance. It promises another chance to plant, build, trade, fish, cook, and gather with family before evening returns. For the ancient Egyptians, that promise carried profound meaning. Historians generally agree that the sun occupied one of the most important places in Egyptian religious thought. Its dependable journey across the sky became a powerful symbol of order, renewal, and the continuous rhythm of life. Watching the dawn now, you understand why. The first rays spread across the Nile, turning quiet water into a shimmering sheet of gold. Mist rises gently from cooler channels, drifting through the reeds before disappearing into the warming air. And the beauty feels effortless. A fisherman pauses before launching his boat. He quietly watches the horizon for a few moments. Nearby, a farmer removes his simple linen head covering and stands silently as sunlight reaches the fields. Neither gesture feels dramatic, just respectful. You continue toward a temple whose eastern entrance welcomes the first light of day. The enormous gateway glows softly while long shadows stretch behind the towering columns. The builders planned this carefully. Nothing here happened by accident. Many Egyptian temples were aligned with remarkable precision, allowing sunlight to illuminate specific spaces during important times of the year. These architectural choices reflected both careful observation of the heavens and deep religious significance. Stone followed the sky. Inside the temple courtyard, several priests quietly prepare for morning rituals. Clay lamps used through the night are extinguished one by one as natural daylight gradually replaces them. Darkness retreats peacefully. No one rushes it away. The scent of incense slowly rises through the cool air, blending with the fresh fragrance of lotus flowers floating in nearby pools. The atmosphere feels calm, almost timeless. A young apprentice gently sweeps fallen leaves from the temple floor before stopping to admire a beam of sunlight slowly climbing one of the painted columns. Even simple tasks become moments of reflection. The sun touches everyone. You notice carving showing the solar disk spreading its rays across the land. Birds fly beneath it. Plants bloom toward it. Kings receive its blessing. Ordinary people work beneath its warmth. Every scene celebrates balance, not domination. The Egyptians did not imagine themselves defeating nature. They sought harmony with it. Living in such an intense climate naturally encouraged this way of thinking. The same sun that nourished crops could also exhaust workers. The same heat that dried mud bricks for new homes could threaten harvest if respected too little. Power required balance. That lesson appeared every day. Historians still debate how ordinary villagers understood complex religious ideas compared with educated priests and royal officials. Formal theology could become highly sophisticated, yet everyday belief probably remained grounded in practical experience and familiar rituals passed from one generation to the next. Faith often grows from daily life, not distant philosophy. Outside the temple, women place fresh flowers near a small shrine before continuing toward the marketplace. A merchant quietly offers a brief prayer before arranging his baskets of produce. A fisherman does the same before pushing away from shore. These moments are short, almost private. The sacred and the ordinary seem to walk side by side. One intriguing belief preserved in several ancient texts describes the sun traveling across the sky by day before continuing its mysterious journey through the unseen world during the night. By overcoming darkness each evening and returning safely every dawn, it demonstrated the triumph of order over uncertainty. The story feels comforting, especially after watching sunrise yourself, whether farmer or pharaoh. Everyone awoke to the same familiar light. Children chase one another between palm trees while their parents smile from nearby courtyards. The younger ones probably think little about theology. They simply enjoy another beautiful morning. Yet perhaps that simple joy captures something important. Religious life was not always solemn. Sometimes gratitude appears as ordinary happiness. The breeze carries the scent of wet reeds once again. It cools your face as birds skim low across the Nile searching for breakfast. Nature continues its quiet rhythm. You remember nearly every lesson from your journey so far. The cool mud brick homes, the shaded markets, the rooftop evenings, the clay water jars, the patient farmers, the careful healers. Every practical solution reflected close attention to the environment. Faith reflected that same attention. Many temple walls also feature scenes of fertile fields, flowing canals, healthy livestock, and abundant harvests. These were not merely decorative images. They celebrated survival. Life beside the desert depended upon delicate balance, and religious ceremonies often express gratitude for that fragile harmony. The connection feels deeply human. As the morning grows warmer, people gradually return to familiar routines. Builders resume their work. Potters shape fresh clay. Bakers prepare another day's bread. Nothing extraordinary happens. That may be the greatest miracle of all. A civilization lasting thousands of years depends less upon spectacular moments than upon ordinary mornings repeated faithfully. Some researchers continue debating the exact symbolism behind certain solar rituals, temple alignments, and ceremonial processions. Archaeological discoveries regularly add new pieces to the puzzle, while fresh interpretations remind us that ancient belief systems were often richer and more complex than simple summaries suggest. History keeps inviting new questions. That is part of its charm. You pause beneath a sycamore tree overlooking the bright river. Sunlight filters gently through its leaves, creating moving patterns across the ground. The shade feels familiar now, almost like an old friend. You realize that after walking through countless Egyptian days, you no longer see the desert sun merely as an enemy to endure. It is a teacher, a guide, a constant companion shaping every decision from sunrise until the first evening stars. Tomorrow's routines will begin exactly as today's did, with quiet respect for light, warmth, water, and time. yet even after thousands of years, these sands still conceal countless mysteries waiting patiently beneath their surface, ready to challenge everything historians believe they know about life in this extraordinary land. Another peaceful dawn settles across the Nile Valley, and by now the rhythm of ancient Egypt feels wonderfully familiar. You wake before sunrise almost without thinking. The cool air greets your skin. Birds announce the coming day from the reeds, somewhere in the distance. A baker begins preparing another batch of bread. The routine feels timeless, almost comforting, yet even after spending so many days among these villages, you quickly discover that ancient Egypt never reveals all of its secrets. Some remain hidden, not beneath the sand alone. Within the ordinary moments of daily life, you walk toward a small excavation where modern archaeologists, many centuries later, would one day uncover the remains of an ordinary neighborhood rather than a royal tomb. The location seems unremarkable. That is precisely why it matters. Historians generally agree that for much of the 19th century, attention focused heavily upon kings, pyramids, and spectacular treasures. More recent archaeology has increasingly emphasized the lives of ordinary people, revealing kitchens, workshops, gardens, toys, storage jars, and humble homes. The everyday became extraordinary. One cracked clay bowl can tell an entire story. You kneel beside a simple cooking hearth blackened by ancient fires. Nothing here shines with gold, no enormous statues tower overhead, only quiet evidence remains: ash, broken pottery, animal bones, grinding stones worn smooth by thousands of patient hands. These objects speak softly. Still, they speak. The smell of warm earth rises gently as the morning sun begins heating the ground. Fine grains of sand slip through your fingers while you imagine the family who once prepared meals in this very place. Who were they? What made them laugh? Did they complain about yesterday's heat just as you sometimes do? History rarely answers such questions directly. That silence makes the past feel surprisingly personal. Nearby lies the broken neck of a familiar clay water jar. You smile immediately. Those remarkable vessels have accompanied you throughout this journey. Even shattered fragments reveal how essential they once were. Simple technology, lasting influence. Researchers continue discovering subtle variations in the shape, thickness, and composition of these jars. Some cooled water more efficiently than others. Different regions developed local styles reflecting available clay and community traditions. Even ordinary pottery evolves. You continue walking until you reach the remains of a modest workshop where a potter once shaped hundreds of vessels beneath a shaded roof. Only scattered tools remain: a broken wheel, fragments of kiln walls, hardened lumps of discarded clay. Yet the place still feels strangely alive. You can almost hear the quiet hum of spinning pottery wheels and the gentle conversations that once filled the workshop during cooler morning hours. Archaeology encourages imagination. Careful imagination. One particularly fascinating mystery involves how ordinary Egyptians adapted to unusually hot years that left almost no written record. Scientists study ancient pollen, river sediments, tree rings from neighboring regions, and microscopic evidence preserved within the landscape to reconstruct forgotten climate patterns. The Earth remembers, even when people do not. Historians still debate how frequently severe heat waves affected ancient Egypt compared with modern conditions. Climate shifted gradually across thousands of years, yet determining the precise experience of individual villages remains remarkably difficult. Nature rarely keeps diaries, it leaves clues instead. As you continue exploring, your attention is drawn toward a cluster of footprints preserved in hardened mud. Not real footprints anymore, only their ancient impressions. Children once ran here, perhaps carrying baskets, perhaps chasing one another before breakfast. Their names have vanished, their footsteps remain. The thought feels quietly moving. Nearby, archaeologists have uncovered tiny clay animal figures no larger than your hand. Were they toys, religious offerings, practice pieces made by apprentice potters? No one knows with complete certainty. The mystery itself becomes part of the story. One charming fringe theory occasionally appears in popular books claiming that Egyptians possessed secret cooling technologies now completely lost to history. It sounds exciting. The evidence, however, points somewhere far more impressive. They did not rely upon mysterious machines. They relied upon careful observation. Thick mud brick walls, shaded courtyards, evaporative cooling, loose linen, early work schedules, cool rooftops, simple ideas working together. Reality often proves more ingenious than fantasy. Another enduring mystery concerns the exact appearance of many ancient gardens. Archaeologists recover seeds, pollen, irrigation channels, and artistic depictions. Yet reconstructing the full beauty of these spaces remains challenging. How fragrant were they? How colourful? Which flowers bloomed together during different seasons? The answers remain incomplete. That uncertainty leaves room for gentle wonder. You wander toward the edge of a quiet cemetery where simple burials rest far from the magnificent royal tombs that attract most visitors. Here, ordinary people sleep: farmers, craftsmen, merchants, parents, children, the same people whose daily routines have accompanied you throughout this journey. Their possessions are modest. Their stories matter equally. Modern archaeology increasingly recognizes this truth. Understanding ancient Egypt means understanding everyone, not only its rulers. The breeze freshens slightly, carrying the familiar scent of the Nile across open ground. Reeds whisper softly. Birds lift gracefully into the brightening sky. The landscape feels unchanged despite the passing millennia. One particularly intriguing discovery from several workers' villages suggests that labourers occasionally left humorous drawings and casual messages on pieces of broken pottery. Little jokes, quick sketches, ordinary thoughts. Historians continue discussing exactly how widespread this practice became. But such discoveries reveal something wonderfully familiar. People have always enjoyed leaving small traces of themselves behind. Not every message was intended for eternity. As the sun climbs higher, you realize that the greatest mystery surrounding ancient Egypt may not concern hidden chambers or forgotten treasures. It concerns ordinary resilience. How did millions of people build fulfilling lives in such a demanding environment for thousands of years? The answer has slowly revealed itself through every step of your journey. Not through one remarkable invention, through thousands of sensible choices repeated every single day. That quiet wisdom, passed from parents to children across generations, became stronger than the desert itself. Soon you will take one final walk beside the Nile, watching the sun set over the same timeless landscape and reflecting upon everything these patient people can still teach us today. The sun rises once more above the eastern horizon, and by now you know almost instinctively what will happen next. Birds greet the dawn from the reeds. Fishermen untie their boats before the air grows warm. Bakers shape fresh dough while the village slowly awakens beneath a sky washed with soft gold. Nothing feels repetitive. Instead, it feels reassuring. You have learned the rhythm. The rhythm has quietly become part of you. As you wander beside the Nile for what feels like one final ordinary morning, you begin noticing details that once escaped your attention. They seem small individually. Together they explain everything. A woman opens her doorway just enough to welcome the cool morning breeze while keeping the strongest sunlight outside. A potter places fresh clay beneath a shaded shelter before beginning work. Children instinctively choose the cooler side of a courtyard for their games. No one pauses to explain these choices. They simply happen. Wisdom has become habit. Historians generally agree that many of the most successful adaptations developed by ancient Egyptians required neither expensive materials nor complicated inventions. Instead, they depended upon observing nature patiently across countless generations. Watch the sun, watch the wind, watch the river, then build your life accordingly. It sounds almost obvious. Yet civilizations often flourish because of obvious ideas applied consistently. You find yourself standing once again beside one of the familiar mud brick homes that welcomed you many days ago. The thick walls remain cool despite the strengthening sunlight outside. You place your hand against the surface. The sensation feels comforting. Simple earth, simple straw, extraordinary understanding. Long before modern engineers discussed thermal mass, these builders had already discovered how slowly packed earth absorbs heat and how effectively it protects those living within. The lesson remains timeless, nearby. A grandfather quietly teaches his grandson how to inspect the family's water jars. He taps gently against each vessel before nodding with satisfaction. The sound matters. Cracks waste water. Healthy jars protect it. The child watches carefully. Tomorrow he will remember. One generation becomes the next. Across the lane, women spread damp linen over woven baskets filled with vegetables waiting for the afternoon meal. The moisture evaporates slowly, helping preserve freshness just a little longer beneath the Egyptian sun. Again, no complicated machinery, only observation. You smile. Throughout your journey, the greatest innovations have often appeared almost invisible because they blended so naturally into daily life. Real intelligence rarely announces itself loudly. The marketplace begins filling once more as merchants carefully arrange their goods beneath familiar patches of shade. You notice something you overlooked before. Many stalls leave small open spaces between displays, allowing air to circulate instead of trapping heat beneath tightly packed coverings. Comfort influences design. Even commerce breathes. A gentle wind moves through the square, fluttering linen cloth and carrying the sweet aroma of dates, fresh bread, and herbs. The market almost seems to sigh with relief. You remember how uncomfortable this same place felt beneath the fierce afternoon sun only days earlier. Timing changes everything. Some researchers studying traditional architecture today continue drawing inspiration from ancient Egyptian building methods. Thick earthen walls, shaded courtyards, natural ventilation, and careful orientation remain surprisingly effective in many hot climates around the world. Old ideas often become new again. The past occasionally points toward the future. Not every lesson belongs in a museum. You continue toward the irrigation canals where farmers quietly inspect water, flowing through carefully maintained channels. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. You now understand why each movement matters. One man removes a small clump of reeds blocking the current. Another smooths a damaged section of earth with his sandal. Neither task appears impressive. Both protect tomorrow's harvest. Civilizations grow through maintenance, not only through monuments. Historians still debate the precise population of ancient Egypt during different periods, making it difficult to estimate exactly how many people relied upon these daily systems. Regardless of the numbers, millions of ordinary decisions combine to sustain one of history's longest-lasting civilizations. The mathematics of survival is surprisingly simple. Many small successes, very few careless mistakes. One delightful tradition preserved in ancient wisdom. Literature encourages moderation in nearly everything, including work, conversation, eating, and behavior. Scholars continue discussing how widely such advice influenced everyday life. Yet its calm tone feels entirely consistent with the balanced routines you have witnessed. Moderation suits the desert. Extremes rarely do. You pause beside a broad sycamore tree whose welcoming shade has accompanied many of your walks. Children once played here. Merchants rested here. Travelers cooled themselves here before continuing toward the river. The tree has quietly served everyone, without asking who they were. Birdsong fills its branches. A soft breeze stirs its leaves. The familiar rustling sound feels almost like an old friend saying hello one last time. As the morning advances, sunlight dances across the Nile in thousands of tiny flashes. Fishermen guide their boats patiently between patches of reeds while white birds glide low above the calm water. The river appears eternal. Perhaps that explains why the Egyptians trusted it so deeply. You think back to every lesson gathered throughout your journey. Wake before sunrise. Build with earth. Store water wisely. Value shade. Dress lightly. Respect the wind. Rest when needed. Observe carefully. Share knowledge. Live with nature rather than against it. None of these ideas sound dramatic. Together, They created extraordinary resilience. You realize that modern visitors often admire Egypt's towering monuments first. The people who actually lived here might have admired something else entirely. A cool house, a full water jar, healthy crops, a pleasant evening breeze across a rooftop. Those everyday blessings mattered just as much, perhaps even more. The afternoon still waits ahead, but you know exactly how the village will meet it. Calmly, patiently, with habits refined over thousands of years. Only one final sunset remains before your journey through this remarkable land gently comes to its peaceful conclusion beside the ever-flowing Nile. The final day of your journey begins as every Egyptian day has begun, with cool air resting gently upon the Nile Valley before the sun slowly claims the sky. By now, the sounds feel wonderfully familiar. A fisherman unties his boat, a donkey shakes the sleep from its ears, birds rise from the reeds in graceful circles. Somewhere nearby, fresh bread begins its quiet transformation inside a clay oven. The village awakens, so do you, this morning. However, there is no urgency to reach another destination. Instead, you simply walk beside the river that has accompanied every chapter of your journey. The Nile flows exactly as it always has, patiently, confidently, without asking for attention. Its surface catches the first golden light, turning gentle ripples into thousands of shimmering reflections. A cool breeze drifts across the water and brushes softly against your face. You pause. There is nothing left to hurry toward. For many days you have followed ordinary Egyptians through every hour beneath one of the world's most demanding climates. You have watched them greet dawn before the heat arrived. You stepped inside cool mud brick homes. You wandered shaded marketplaces and peaceful temples. You rested beneath sycamore trees and climbed rooftops beneath brilliant stars. Piece by piece, a quiet truth revealed itself. Ancient Egypt was never built by monuments alone. It was built by mornings. Historians generally agree that remarkable civilizations often endure because ordinary people solve ordinary problems extraordinarily well. Ancient Egypt reminds us of this lesson at every turn. The pyramids inspire awe. The water jar sustained life. One survives because of the other. As you continue along the riverbank, familiar faces greet you once more. The elderly farmer adjusts another irrigation channel with the same patient care you admired on your first morning. The potter shapes another vessel from cool clay. Children launch tiny reed boats into the canal, laughing exactly as they did before. Nothing remarkable has changed. That is precisely the point. Consistency created resilience. A flock of white egrets rises from the marshes, their wings catching the warm morning sunlight before they disappear toward distant fields. Frogs call quietly among the reeds. Fish ripple the calm surface of the river. Nature continues its endless conversation. The people simply listen. You stop beneath your favorite sycamore tree, whose broad branches have offered generous shade throughout your travels. The trunk feels comfortably warm beneath your hand. The leaves whisper gently overhead. The tree asks for nothing, yet it has given comfort to countless generations. Nearby, a grandmother smiles as she teaches her youngest grandchild how to carry a small clay cup without spilling precious water. Tiny hands, careful steps, patient guidance. The lesson seems wonderfully ordinary. One day, the child will teach another. This is how civilizations truly endure, not through grand speeches, through quiet repetition. Some scholars still debate exactly why ancient Egypt remained so stable for such an astonishing span of history, compared with many neighboring societies. Geography, agriculture, political organization, religion, and environmental adaptation all played important roles. There was never a single answer. History rarely offers one. One intriguing thought occasionally raised by researchers is that daily cooperation around water management may have quietly strengthened communities in ways that left few written records. Maintaining canals, sharing resources, and respecting seasonal rhythms demanded trust between neighbors. The evidence continues to grow. The conversation continues as well. As the sun climbs higher, You notice that nothing you have learned depends upon forgotten magic or mysterious technology. The greatest secret was never hidden. It stood in plain sight. Observe carefully. Adapt patiently. Respect the environment. Teach the next generation. Repeat. The wisdom feels almost disarmingly simple. Perhaps that is why it lasted. You make your way toward the edge of the village one final time. Behind you, voices blend softly with birdsong. Ahead, the desert stretches toward the horizon, golden and immense beneath the strengthening light. You no longer see it as an enemy, nor as an empty wilderness. It is simply another neighbor, demanding, powerful, beautiful. The Nile and the desert have shaped one another for thousands of years, just as they shaped every family living between them. You turn back toward the river. Its waters continue flowing northward without interruption, carrying reflections of clouds, birds, boats, and countless human lives that have come and gone across the centuries. The current never hurries, neither does history. As the afternoon slowly approaches, you already know what the villagers will do. They will seek shade, drink from cool clay jars, work with steady patience, rest when the sun demands it, gather again when evening returns. Tomorrow will look remarkably like today, and that is something worth admiring. The greatest achievement of ancient Egypt was not merely surviving the desert heat, it was learning to live peacefully within it. Now the sunlight grows softer in your imagination, and the warm breeze from the Nile becomes gentler with every quiet breath. The voices of the village slowly fade into the distance, leaving only the whisper of reeds, the rustle of palm leaves, and the calm rhythm of flowing water. The stars will soon return above the desert, just as they have for countless generations. As you drift towards sleep, you can leave this ancient world exactly where it belongs, peaceful, patient, and timeless, carrying with it the quiet reminder that wisdom often grows from simply listening to nature one gentle day at a time. Sweet dreams.